$25 million won't erase what they did to my son, but it will ensure they never forget it. Diana Johnson stared in disbelief at the settlement check in her hands. The weight of the paper seemed impossibly heavy, as if the zeros printed across it carried physical mass. 6 months ago, her son Marcus had been brutally tased on Flight 1824 for simply asking to use the restroom. Now SkyRoute Airways would never forget the day they messed with Nathan Johnson's son. Before we dive into this shocking true story, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Drop your location in the comments. Hit that like button and subscribe if you want more stories about everyday people standing up against injustice. Now let's see how a routine flight turned into a landmark civil rights case that changed an entire industry. The paper trembled slightly between Diana's fingers, not from fear those days were behind them now, but from the memory of Marcus's body convulsing on the airplane floor as electricity coursed through his young frame. The memory of his cries, the memory of handcuffs on wrists that had never known violence. "We did it," Nathan said quietly, placing his hand on his wife's shoulder, his touch anchoring her to the present moment rather than the past that still haunted them all. Diana nodded, folding the check carefully. This was never about the money. No, Nathan agreed. It was about justice. The morning of May 12th began like any other for the Johnson family. Marcus Johnson, a bright and polite 14-year-old honor student, was excitedly packing his carry-on bag for his first ever flight. He had triple-checked his packing list, making sure he had his headphones, books, and the travel journal his father had given him to document the trip. "Mom, do you think the clouds look different from above?" Marcus asked, his brown eyes wide with anticipation as he zipped up his backpack. The walls of his bedroom were covered with posters of NASA launches and famous landmarks he hoped to visit someday. A model airplane hung from the ceiling, a gift from his grandfather, who had served as one of the first black Air Force pilots in his generation. Diana Johnson smiled at her son, adjusting her watch as she prepared for their trip to Boston. Petite but strong, with close-cropped natural hair and warm brown eyes that crinkled at the corners. When she smiled, Diana carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who saved lives daily as a pediatric trauma nurse. The mother-son journey was a special treat, a chance to visit the prestigious universities Marcus dreamed of attending someday. Harvard, MIT, Princeton. All possibilities for a student with his academic record. "I wish Dad could come with us," Marcus said, his excitement momentarily dimming. "Your father would be here if he could," Diana assured him. "But this case is important. You know how passionate he is about his work." Dr. Nathan Johnson was indeed passionate about his work. As one of the most respected civil rights attorneys in Atlanta, he had built his reputation defending victims of discrimination. Once a prosecutor who had seen the justice system from the inside, he now fought to hold that very system accountable. Tall and imposing at 6'2", with a shaved head and penetrating dark eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, Nathan carried himself with the dignified confidence of a man who had faced courtroom battles for 2 decades. That morning he was preparing for a crucial hearing in a class action lawsuit against a major corporation accused of discriminatory hiring practices. "He'll join us in 3 days," Diana reminded Marcus, just in time for our campus tour. In the kitchen, Nathan kissed his wife and son goodbye, promising to call as soon as his hearing concluded. "Remember everything you see, Marcus?" he said, his hand resting on his son's shoulder. "I want a full report when I get there." Marcus nodded solemnly. Nathan had always taught him the importance of observation, of seeing the world as it truly was, not just as it presented itself. "Watch how people treat each other," Nathan often said. "That tells you more about a place than any brochure ever will." As Nathan turned to leave, he paused, a habit formed over years of fathering a black son in America. "And Marcus, I know, Dad, Marcus said with the weary understanding of a conversation they'd had many times before. Carry myself with dignity, even when others don't. Remember that time at the Science Museum when you corrected the tour guide about Jupiter's moons? Nathan said with a sudden smile, breaking the seriousness of the moment. You were what? 9. Marcus groaned, but his eyes lit up at the memory. He kept saying, Europa was Saturn's moon. Someone had to tell him. And you did very politely, Diana added with a laugh. Our little astronomer. Nathan's expression warmed. That's my boy. Confident in your knowledge, respectful in your delivery. Just like that, okay? Got it, Marcus said, visibly more relaxed. Love you, Dad. Love you too, son. The drive to Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport was smooth, and the check-in process went without a hitch. As they waited at the gate for boarding to begin, Marcus people-watched, taking notes in his journal about the diverse travelers around them. Diana smiled, recognizing Nathan's influence in their son's observant nature. You're just like your father, she said. Always studying the world. Marcus grinned. Dad says that's how you change things, by seeing what's wrong first. Diana squeezed his hand. And he's right. But today, try to just enjoy the experience too. It's your first flight. That's special. When boarding for SkyRoute Airways Flight 1824 was announced, Marcus and Diana joined the line. The boarding process was orderly, with first-class passengers and those needing assistance boarding first. When their group was called, they made their way down the jetway. The morning at Atlanta's busiest terminal had started with trouble. A technical glitch in SkyRoute's payment system had caused multiple card rejections during online check-in, forcing the ground crew to manually verify reservations. The resulting delays had created a tense atmosphere, with passengers packed tightly in the narrow jet bridge, checking watches and sighing audibly. Flight attendant Rebecca Winters stood at the aircraft door, her expression strained beneath her professional smile. At 42, Rebecca had been with SkyRoute for 15 years, rising through the ranks to become a senior cabin crew member. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a tight bun, her uniform impeccably pressed despite the early hour and mounting stress. Though few passengers knew it, Rebecca had lost her brother-in-law in the Pentagon attack on 9/11, a tragedy that had profoundly shaped her view of airline security. To her, vigilance wasn't just professional duty, it was personal. Welcome aboard, she said mechanically to the middle-aged white couple ahead of Marcus and Diana. When the couple mentioned it was their anniversary trip, Rebecca immediately warmed up, offering congratulations and promising them a special dessert during the meal service. When Marcus and Diana reached the door, Rebecca's smile stiffened. Boarding passes, she said flatly, extending her hand without making eye contact. No welcome aboard, no warm wishes for their trip. Marcus noticed the shift, but said nothing as they made their way to their seats in row 24. As they settled in, he observed Rebecca's interactions with other passengers. Her demeanor seemed to shift depending on who she was addressing. With white passengers, she was attentive and warm. With passengers of color, particularly black passengers, her tone became curt, her instructions more commanding than helpful. Did you notice that Marcus whispered to his mother, his observant nature picking up on the subtle discrimination? Diana nodded slightly. Just focus on enjoying your first flight, honey. Some people carry their biases everywhere they go. Further down the aisle, Rebecca assisted an elderly white woman with storing her bag, laughing warmly at the woman's jokes. Moments later, she tersely directed a middle-aged Hispanic man to hurry it up as he struggled with the overhead compartment. Marcus wrote in his journal, "Different words for different people." As the final preparations for takeoff were completed, Marcus thumbed through the safety card in the seatback pocket, memorizing the emergency exits and procedures. The plane backed away from the gate, taxied to the runway, and soon they were airborne Atlanta, growing smaller beneath them. Marcus pressed his face to the window, watching in awe as the city transformed into a miniature model, then disappeared beneath a layer of clouds. "Mom, we're flying," he whispered, his earlier observations temporarily forgotten in the wonder of his first ascent. Diana smiled, squeezing his hand. "What do you think?" "It's like nothing I've ever felt before," Marcus replied, his eyes wide. "Like we're breaking free of everything down there." Once they reached cruising altitude, the captain's voice came over the intercom. "Folks, we've reached our cruising altitude of 33,000 feet. I'm turning off the seatbelt sign so you're free to move about the cabin. However, we're expecting some turbulence ahead on our approach to Philadelphia, so enjoy this smooth air while it lasts." Marcus was mesmerized by the view from his window seat. The patchwork of fields and forests, the winding silver ribbons of rivers, and the cotton ball clouds now below them. About an hour into the flight, the captain's voice returned. "Folks, we're expecting that turbulence I mentioned earlier. I'm turning the seatbelt sign back on. Please return to your seats and make sure your seatbelts are fastened." Marcus had been sipping apple juice, and now he felt an urgent need to use the restroom. He tried to wait, shifting uncomfortably in his seat as the minutes passed. The fastened seatbelt sign remained illuminated, but the turbulence hadn't materialized, and Marcus noticed several passengers ignoring the warning to use the restrooms. A white teenager about Marcus's age from a few rows ahead stood up and walked to the bathroom. Rebecca, who was checking the cabin, said nothing to him. After 15 more uncomfortable minutes, Marcus couldn't wait any longer. "Mom," he whispered, "I really need to go." Diana glanced at the seatbelt sign, then at her son's discomfort. "Okay, but be quick. Come right back if it gets bumpy." With a nod, Marcus unfastened his seatbelt and stood up. He made his way carefully into the aisle, holding onto seatbacks for stability. Before Marcus could take 3 steps, Rebecca appeared before him, her arms crossed over her chest. "The seatbelt sign is on," she said sharply. "Return to your seat immediately." Marcus, startled by her tone, but remembering his father's lessons about staying calm, replied politely, "I'm sorry, ma'am. I really need to use the restroom. I saw others going, so I thought it would be okay." Rebecca's eyes narrowed. "I won't tell you again. Return to your seat now." Marcus, confused by the disparity in treatment, gestured discreetly toward the bathroom, where the white teenager was just exiting. "But that boy just went, and you didn't stop him." "I'll be quick, I promise." Something in Rebecca's expression hardened. Her nostrils flared slightly, and her lips pressed into a thin line. The bathroom door opened, and the white teenager emerged, walking back to his seat without comment from Rebecca. For a split second, Rebecca's mind flashed back to that terrible September morning in 2001, to the frantic calls, the uncertainty, the eventual confirmation that her brother-in-law David would never come home. Her training director's words echoed in her memory. "The moment you lose control of your cabin is the moment danger begins." In her mind, this teenager's questioning wasn't just disobedience. It was the first crack in the wall of security she was duty-bound to maintain. "Are you questioning my authority?" Rebecca asked, her voice rising enough that nearby passengers turned to look. "No, ma'am," Marcus said, growing increasingly uncomfortable with the attention. "I just really need to use the bathroom." Diana, now aware of the situation, unfastened her seatbelt and stood up. "Excuse me," she began. "My son simply needs to—" Rebecca cut her off with a raised hand. "Ma'am, I need your son to comply with safety regulations. The seatbelt sign is on." By now, several passengers were watching the exchange. A middle-aged Hispanic man in a cardigan a few rows back frowned at the escalating situation. A white woman nearby whispered something to her husband. Marcus stood frozen, unsure what to do. Embarrassment and confusion were evident in his face. "I'm sorry if I did something wrong," he said, his voice small. I just don't understand why. The flight attendant's hand moved to her pocket, and something in her expression shifted from annoyance to something darker. The tension in the cabin was palpable, as passengers sensed the situation spiraling beyond a routine enforcement of airline rules. "Either you sit down right now," Rebecca said, her voice tight with suppressed anger, "or I'll consider you a threat to cabin safety." Diana stood fully now. A threat. He's a 14-year-old boy who needs to use the bathroom. The same bathroom you just let another child use without saying a word. "Ma'am, I need you to sit down as well," Rebecca said, her hand still in her pocket. "This is your final warning," Mom Marcus said quietly, beginning to turn back toward his seat. "It's okay. I'll wait." But it was too late. The next few seconds unfolded in slow motion, forever seared into the memories of everyone on Flight 1824. Rebecca's hand emerged from her pocket, clutching what appeared to be a small black device. Before anyone could react, she pointed it at Marcus and pressed a button. Two metal prongs shot out, trailing thin wires that connected with Marcus's chest. His body went rigid as 50,000 volts of electricity coursed through him. His eyes widened in shock and pain, a strangled cry escaping his lips before his muscles contracted violently. Diana screamed, lunging forward as her son's body convulsed. The boy collapsed into the aisle, his limbs twitching uncontrollably as the electrical current continued to flow. The cabin erupted in chaos. Passengers gasped, some standing to get a better view, others shrinking back in horror. The sharp smell of ozone filled the air, mingling with the scent of fear. "Oh my God! She tased him! She tased that child!" a woman shrieked from the back of the plane. Phones appeared in hands as passengers began recording the shocking scene. The white teenager, who had used the bathroom moments before, stared open-mouthed, his face pale with shock. In row 18, Isabella Gonzalez, a young Hispanic woman traveling to a job interview, had already been discreetly filming Rebecca's behavior since boarding. Now, her hands steady despite her racing heart, she captured the entire assault in horrifying clarity. After what seemed like an eternity, but was only seconds, Rebecca released the trigger. Marcus lay motionless on the floor, small, involuntary tremors still running through his body. A wet stain spread across his jeans. The electricity had caused him to lose control of his bladder. Diana fell to her knees beside her son, her nurse's training kicking in despite her maternal terror. "Marcus. Marcus, can you hear me?" She placed her fingers against his neck, feeling for his pulse, which raced erratically under her fingertips. "Stay back, ma'am," Rebecca commanded, still holding the taser. He was becoming aggressive and non-compliant. "He's 14 years old," Diana shouted, tears streaming down her face. "He needed to use the bathroom." "What is wrong with you?" The Hispanic man in the cardigan stood up, his face a mask of controlled fury. "I saw the whole thing," he said, his voice carrying throughout the now silent cabin. "That boy did nothing wrong. Nothing." "Sir, please remain in your seat," Rebecca ordered, but her voice had lost some of its authority. A white man in a business suit spoke up. The boy was questioning her instructions. "In these times, you can't be too careful with potential threats." "Threats?" the Hispanic man exclaimed. "He's a child who needed to use the restroom. What kind of threat did you perceive?" Marcus's eyes fluttered open. Disorientation and pain etched across his young face. "Mom," he whispered, his voice cracking. "What happened?" Diana cradled her son's head, her entire body trembling with a mixture of relief and rage. "It's okay, baby. I'm here." A man in a blazer pushed his way through the gathered crowd. "Air Marshal Jordan Foster," he announced, flashing a badge. Instead of addressing Rebecca and her unauthorized use of a taser, he turned to Marcus. Son, I need you to remain calm and follow instructions. Are you kidding me? Diana said incredulously. My son was just assaulted. He needs medical attention, not more intimidation. Marcus struggled to sit up, his movements jerky and uncoordinated. The humiliation of the situation hit him as he became aware of his wet pants and the dozens of eyes fixed on him. Tears welled in his eyes, but he fought them back, his father's words echoing in his head. Never let them see you broken, son. The flight attendant perceived a threat and responded, according to her training. Marshal Foster stated, though uncertainty flickered in his eyes as he glanced at the taser in Rebecca's hand. Training the Hispanic man challenged stepping closer. I've been flying for 40 years, and I've never seen a flight attendant carrying a taser, let alone using one on a child. My name is Hector Ramirez, and I was a high school principal for 30 years. I know threatening behavior when I see it, and this young man showed none. Other passengers began to voice their opinions, the cabin dividing into factions. Some defended Rebecca, citing the need for security and compliance with crew instructions. Others were appalled, pointing out the clear racial disparity in how the situation had been handled. I saw that white boy use the bathroom during the seatbelt sign too, and she didn't say a word to him, a Latina woman called out from several rows back. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, due to an incident in the cabin, we will be making an emergency landing in Philadelphia. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened. We'll be on the ground in approximately 20 minutes. As the plane began its descent, Diana helped Marcus back to their seats. His body still trembled from the after effects of the taser, and his eyes held a new weariness that broke his mother's heart. She took out her phone with shaking hands, navigating to Nathan's contact. Unable to call during the descent, she texted emergency. Marcus tased by flight attendant on plane for trying to use bathroom. Landing in Philadelphia. Need you now. She attached a video link that another passenger had already uploaded to social media. Miles away, in an Atlanta courtroom, Nathan Johnson's phone vibrated in his pocket. During a brief recess, he checked the message, his blood turning to ice as he watched the grainy footage of his son convulsing on the airplane floor. Without a word to his colleagues, he gathered his papers and strode out of the courtroom, already booking the next flight to Philadelphia. On Flight 1824, Marcus leaned his head against the window, silent tears streaming down his face as the plane descended through the clouds. His first flight had become a nightmare, and somewhere deep inside, a terrible understanding was taking root that in America, even the sky wasn't safe for a black boy. The wheels of Flight 1824 screeched against the tarmac of Philadelphia International Airport, the plane coming to a stop far from the terminal. Through the windows, passengers could see police vehicles and ambulances, their lights flashing against the gray afternoon sky. "Would you look at that response time?" muttered Hector Ramirez, the retired principal who had defended Marcus. "Funny how fast they show up when it's a black kid being accused instead of protected." As the seatbelt sign dinged off, the captain's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated. Local authorities will be boarding the aircraft. We ask for your continued patience and cooperation." Diana held Marcus's hand tightly, her jaw set with determination, though her heart raced with fear. Years of advocating for patients in the healthcare system had prepared her somewhat for what was coming. Marcus, still physically shaken from the taser, had withdrawn into himself, his eyes fixed on the seat in front of him. The humiliation of sitting in wet clothes, of being publicly degraded, weighed on him as heavily as the physical pain. The cabin door opened, and 4 Philadelphia police officers boarded the plane, followed by 2 SkyRoute Airways representatives in crisp navy suits. Rebecca hurried to meet them, speaking rapidly and gesturing toward Marcus. The lead officer, a broad-shouldered man with a crew cut, made his way down the aisle, stopping at row 24. "Are you Marcus Johnson?" he asked, his hand resting casually on his holster. Before Marcus could answer, Diana spoke up. My son needs medical attention. He was assaulted with a taser by your flight attendant for attempting to use the restroom. Ma'am, we've received reports of an unruly passenger who became aggressive and threatened a crew member. The officer replied. I need your son to come with us. That's not what happened, Hector called out, standing again despite the officer's presence. The boy did nothing wrong. Check the footage. Dozens of us recorded what really happened. The officer barely glanced at Hector. Sir, please remain seated. We'll take statements later. To Diana and Marcus's horror, the officer produced a pair of handcuffs. Stand up, son. Hands behind your back. You're arresting him. Diana's voice rose in disbelief. He's the victim here. We're detaining him while we sort this out. The officer corrected, though the distinction meant little as he reached for Marcus's wrists. Diana placed herself between the officer and her son. My son needs medical attention, not handcuffs. I'm a registered nurse, and he's showing signs of cardiac stress from electrical shock. Ma'am, if you interfere with this detention, I'll have to arrest you as well, the officer warned. Hector moved into the aisle phone held high. I'm recording this. That boy needs a doctor, not handcuffs, and he needs his rights protected. Several other passengers joined Hector, holding up their phones. We all saw what happened. A middle-aged white woman in a business suit said. The flight attendant was out of line. The standoff continued until a second officer moved forward. We can take him to the hospital under guard, but he's coming with us. Diana, seeing no immediate alternative, nodded stiffly. I'm coming with him. He's a minor, and I'm his mother. The officers agreed to this, though they still placed Marcus in handcuffs before escorting him off the plane. The image of a handcuffed, trembling black teenager being led through the first-class cabin would later become one of the most powerful visuals in the media coverage of the incident. As they reached the jet bridge, Diana looked back to see Hector and several other passengers exchanging contact information, preparing to stand as witnesses. Their small acts of solidarity provided the only glimmer of hope in the dark situation. Mom, Marcus whispered, as they walked, his voice barely audible. I want Dad. Diana squeezed his shoulder, the only comfort she could offer, as her son was led away in handcuffs. He's on his way, baby. He's on his way. Take those handcuffs off my son right now. Dr. Nathan Johnson's voice cut through the hospital corridor with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel. 6 feet tall, with shoulders broadened by years of college football and a presence honed in countless courtrooms, Nathan radiated controlled fury as he strode toward the police officer stationed outside Marcus's examination room. It had taken Nathan 3 agonizing hours to reach Philadelphia. 3 hours during which his mind had replayed the video of his son being tased over and over, each viewing stoking the fire in his chest. 3 hours of calling in favors, arranging legal representation, and fighting to keep his composure when every instinct screamed for him to rage against what had been done to his child. Officer Kevin Brannigan straightened at Nathan's approach, one hand instinctively moving toward his weapon. Sir, I need you to calm down. I am perfectly calm, Nathan replied, his voice level, despite the storm in his eyes. What I am not is willing to see my 14-year-old son, who needs medical attention after being assaulted, treated like a criminal. I'm Dr. Nathan Johnson, his father and attorney. Dr. Johnson, the officer acknowledged recognition dawning in his eyes. We're following protocol for what? Nathan interrupted. For a minor who asked to use the bathroom. The same bathroom a white child used minutes earlier without incident. I want those restraints removed now, or I'll add excessive force and violation of due process to the lawsuit I'm already preparing. The certainty in Nathan's voice, the absolute lack of bluff, made the officer hesitate. I'll need to check with my supervisor. Make the call, Nathan said, pulling out his phone. I'll be doing the same to Judge Martinez of the Federal Circuit. I represented his daughter last year in a very similar case. The name drop had its intended effect. Within minutes, the handcuffs were removed, though the officer remained stationed outside the room. Nathan entered to find Diana sitting beside Marcus's bed, her hand wrapped protectively around their son's. "Dad," Marcus said, his voice small and strained. Nathan crossed the room in 2 strides, gathering his son in a careful embrace. "I'm here now," he whispered, feeling Marcus's body still trembling slightly. "I'm here." Over Marcus's shoulder, his eyes met Diana's. In her face, he saw everything she couldn't say in front of their son. The rage, the fear, the helplessness that had consumed her in the hours before his arrival. Nathan nodded slightly, a silent promise. This won't stand. As he pulled back, Nathan took in the medical monitor attached to Marcus's chest, the IV in his arm, the hospital gown that made him look smaller than his 14 years. "What are the doctors saying?" he asked Diana. "Cardiac arrhythmia from the electrical shock," she replied, her nurse's training evident in the clinical precision of her words, though her voice shook slightly. "Muscle damage. They're monitoring for delayed complications." Nathan nodded, his jaw tight. And psychologically, Diana's eyes flickered to Marcus, then back to Nathan. They haven't evaluated him yet. Understanding the unspoken message, Nathan turned to his son. "Can you tell me what happened, Marcus? In your own words." Marcus recounted the events on the plane, his voice growing steadier as he spoke. Nathan listened without interruption. Though his expression darkened at certain details, the white teenager allowed to use the bathroom. Rebecca's immediate hostility, the taser appearing without warning. "You did nothing wrong," Nathan said firmly when Marcus finished. "Nothing. This is on them, not you." A knock at the door interrupted them. Detective Ryan Wilson entered, his weathered face set in professional lines. "Dr. Johnson," he said with a nod. "I need to speak with your son about the incident on the plane." Nathan stood, positioning himself between the detective and Marcus's bed. "My son has given his statement to the officers at the scene. He's now receiving medical treatment for injuries sustained when he was assaulted. Any further questioning can wait until he's released and has proper legal representation." Dr. Johnson Wilson began, recognition flickering in his eyes. "I believe we've met before." Nathan studied the detective's face, memory clicking into place. "The Jefferson case. 3 years ago." Wilson nodded. "You represented the plaintiff, made quite an impression on the jury, and you testified for the defense." Nathan replied coolly, "Made quite an impression on me as well." The air between them crackled with the memory of that courtroom battle, a police brutality case, where Wilson had defended his fellow officers' actions only to be systematically dismantled under Nathan's cross-examination. "Look," Wilson said, lowering his voice. "Not everything is about race. Kids can be disruptive. Flight attendants can have bad days. Let's not make this bigger than it needs to be." Nathan's expression didn't change, but his voice dropped to a dangerous quiet. "My son was tased for doing exactly what a white child did without consequence. If you think this isn't about race, you're either blind or complicit." Wilson's expression hardened. "Pursuing this aggressively could result in charges against your son for interfering with a flight crew, a federal offense. Is that really what you want?" Before Nathan could respond, a new voice entered the conversation. "Are you threatening my client's son?" "Detective." All heads turned to see a petite woman in her 50s standing in the doorway, her dark hair streaked with silver, and her expression fierce. Layla Robinson. Nathan's longtime investigator and former FBI agent had arrived. Wilson shifted uncomfortably. "Ms. Robinson, I was just explaining the potential complications of pursuing this matter." "Were you?" Layla asked, stepping into the room. because it sounded remarkably like witness intimidation to me. Shall I record the rest of this conversation for the record? Wilson retreated toward the door. We'll continue this discussion later. Yes, Nathan agreed, with our full legal team present. As the detective left, Layla turned to the Johnson family. Her usual tough demeanor softened as she looked at Marcus. Hello, Marcus. I'm very sorry about what happened to you. Marcus nodded silently, wariness evident in his posture. He'd heard about Layla from his father's stories, how she'd left the FBI after witnessing too many cases, mishandled how she now used her investigative skills to build Nathan's cases, how she was, in Nathan's words, relentless when it comes to the truth. Thank you for coming so quickly, Nathan said to Layla. When you said your son was involved, I was on the first flight out, she replied, setting down her battered leather briefcase. She glanced toward the bedroom door where the officer still stood guard. How is he? Nathan's professional facade cracked slightly. Physically, he'll recover. The other damage he trailed off, unable to complete the thought. Layla squeezed his arm briefly, then opened her briefcase. I've already started digging into SkyRoute Airways and Rebecca Winters. You're not going to like what I found. The fluorescent lights of Philadelphia Memorial Hospital cast harsh shadows across Dr. Elena Vasquez's face as she reviewed Marcus's test results. As the attending physician in the emergency department, she had treated her share of taser injuries, but never in a child so young. The good news, she told the Johnson family, her voice gentle but direct, is that the immediate danger has passed. The EKG shows your heart rhythm is stabilizing, Marcus. Diana, who had been silently reading the monitor herself, nodded in agreement. As a pediatric trauma nurse, she understood the medical jargon all too well and recognized what the doctor wasn't saying. And the concerning news Nathan prompted catching the hesitation in Dr. Vasquez's voice. Dr. Vasquez glanced at Marcus, then back to his parents. There's evidence of muscle damage from the electrical current. This can lead to rhabdomyolysis, the release of muscle proteins into the bloodstream, which can stress the kidneys. We'll need to monitor his renal function for the next 24 to 48 hours. What about neurological effects? Diana asked, her professional knowledge piercing through her maternal fear. The initial assessment shows no permanent neurological damage, Dr. Vasquez replied. However, there can be lingering effects on the nervous system, tremors, anxiety, memory issues. These are typically temporary, but should be monitored. Marcus, who had been quiet throughout the examination, finally spoke. When can I go home? Dr. Vasquez smiled at him. We want to keep you overnight for observation. If all goes well, you could be discharged tomorrow afternoon. As Dr. Vasquez made notes in Marcus's chart, a young Hispanic resident doctor entered the room with additional test results. Dr. Miguel Santos was in his final year of residency, his demeanor professional despite his youth. Dr. Vasquez, I have the additional labs you requested, he said, handing over a file. As he did so, he discreetly slipped a second paper into the folder, a move so subtle Nathan almost missed it. Dr. Vasquez reviewed the labs, her brow furrowing slightly as she noticed the additional document. She glanced at Dr. Santos, who gave an almost imperceptible nod. Mr. and Mrs. Johnson, Dr. Vasquez said, would you mind stepping into the hall with me for a moment to discuss these results? Once in the corridor, safely out of Marcus's earshot, Dr. Vasquez lowered her voice. Dr. Santos has provided a more detailed documentation of Marcus's injuries than our standard protocol requires. She handed them the second document, a comprehensive assessment that cataloged every mark on Marcus's body, complete with measurements and timestamps. It included high-resolution photographs of the taser prong's entry points, the electrical burns on his chest, and the muscle spasms still visible in his hands. The hospital administration has suggested we keep our documentation streamlined, given the sensitive nature of this incident, Dr. Vasquez explained her disapproval evident. SkyRoute has significant influence in this city. They're one of our major corporate donors. But Dr. Santos and I believe in thorough medical documentation, regardless of outside pressures. Nathan took the document, understanding its value as evidence. Thank you, both of you. Dr. Santos nodded. My brother was profiled on a flight last year. Nobody recorded it. Nobody stood up for him. I wish they had. As the doctors returned to their rounds, Nathan and Diana rejoined Marcus in his room. They found him staring at his phone, his expression darkening. Dad, he called, his voice unsteady. People are saying I was being violent. They're saying I deserved it. Nathan crossed to his son, glancing at the social media feeds Marcus was scrolling through. Comments ranged from supportive to viciously racist, with many users accepting SkyRoute's narrative without question. Close that app, Nathan advised, sitting beside Marcus. Social media isn't where truth lives. We know what happened, and we have the evidence to prove it. But they're making me sound like a criminal. Marcus's voice cracked. That's their strategy, Layla explained, joining them. They're trying to control the narrative, but we're going to change that. Diana took Marcus's phone gently from his hands. Let's focus on getting you better. The truth will come out. As she set the phone aside, Diana noticed Marcus's hands still trembling slightly, an after effect of the taser that the doctors had warned might persist for days. The sight rekindled her anger. Her son, her beautiful, brilliant boy, who had never hurt anyone, who had only wanted to use the bathroom like any other child, was now lying in a hospital bed, his body betraying him with tremors he couldn't control. We're going to fight this, she said suddenly, her voice fierce with maternal protection. All the way. Nathan looked at his wife, surprised by the vehemence in her usually measured tone. Diana had always been the family's voice of caution, the one who reminded him to consider all angles before committing to a legal battle. Her instant resolve told him everything about how deeply this had affected her. Yes, he agreed, taking her hand. We are. In that moment, as the three of them sat together in the sterile hospital room, something shifted. What had happened to Marcus was no longer just an incident to be addressed. It was a declaration of war. And the Johnson family was preparing to fight back. The next morning, the incident on Flight 1824 had exploded across media platforms. Nathan awoke in the uncomfortable hospital chair to find competing narratives already taking shape. On his phone, headlines ranged wildly. Teen subdued after threatening flight attendant. SkyRoute defends. Security protocols. After incident, 14-year-old black teen tased on flight after bathroom request. Questions of racial bias in airline tasing. Incident. SkyRoute. Airways wasted no time issuing a statement. SkyRoute. Airways supports our crew members' decisions to ensure cabin safety. Our flight attendants are trained to handle security threats according to protocol. We are conducting an internal review of the incident, and the crew member involved has been placed on administrative leave with pay during this process. Social media had erupted with opinions. The hashtags #justice for Marcus and #support Rebecca began trending nationally, revealing the deep racial divides that still existed in America. They're trying to get ahead of this, Layla noted, showing Nathan her tablet with a compilation of news coverage. Look at the language. Subdued. Security threat. Protocol. They're framing it as a necessary security response rather than what it was, an assault on a child. Nathan nodded grimly. Classic playbook. Control the narrative early. Establish your version as the default. Make the victim prove their innocence, rather than the perpetrator prove their actions were justified. Diana entered the room returning from the nurse's station, where she'd been reviewing Marcus's morning lab results. "His kidney function is improving," she reported. "Dr. Vasquez thinks he can be discharged this afternoon." "That's good news," Nathan said, making room for her beside him. "We need to talk about next steps." Before he could continue, his phone rang. The caller ID showed a number he didn't recognize. "Dr. Johnson speaking." He answered cautiously. "Dr. Johnson, this is Isabella Gonzalez." The woman's voice was soft but determined. "I was on the flight yesterday. I recorded everything, not just the tasing, but Miss Winter's behavior throughout the flight, the way she treated different passengers differently. I want to help." Nathan put the call on speaker. "Ms. Gonzalez, thank you for reaching out. Your testimony could be crucial." "I have more than testimony," Isabella replied. "I have nearly an hour of video documenting Ms. Winter's pattern of behavior. I started recording when I noticed how she was treating passengers of color during boarding. Something felt off. I never expected it to escalate the way it did." "Why were you recording before the incident?" Diana asked, curious about the woman's foresight. "I work in HR compliance," Isabella explained. "I've been trained to document patterns of discriminatory behavior." When I saw how differently she spoke to people based on their appearance, my professional instincts kicked in. "I'm just sorry I couldn't stop what happened to your son." "You've done more than most," Nathan assured her. "Would you be willing to share that footage with us?" "That's why I'm calling," Isabella confirmed. "But I should warn you, SkyRoute's PR team has already contacted me. They offered me flight vouchers to, quote, keep the situation in perspective. When I declined, they suggested that unauthorized recording on an aircraft could potentially violate federal regulations." Nathan's jaw tightened. "They threatened you." "Not explicitly," Isabella clarified, but the implication was clear. "Ms. Gonzalez, I want you to send that footage to a secure email address. I'll text you," Nathan instructed. "And I'd advise you not to communicate further with SkyRoute or their representatives without legal counsel present." After finishing the call and receiving Isabella's footage, Nathan, Diana, and Layla reviewed the videos while Marcus rested. The comprehensive recording was damning, showing Rebecca's consistent pattern of treating white passengers with warmth and respect, while being curt or dismissive with passengers of color. "This completely undermines their security protocol defense," Layla noted. She wasn't following protocol, she was following her biases. As they discussed strategy, a nurse entered with a tablet. "Dr. Johnson, there's a Mr. Ramirez here to see you. He says he was on the flight." Hector Ramirez entered the room moments later, his expression solemn. "How is the boy?" he asked immediately. "Recovering," Diana replied. "Thank you for what you did on the plane, for speaking up." Hector nodded. "I came to offer my testimony for whatever it's worth. I spent 30 years as a principal in the Philadelphia public school system. I know threatening behavior when I see it, and your son showed none." "Your testimony would be invaluable," Nathan said, shaking the man's hand, "especially given your background in education." "There's something else," Hector added, pulling out his phone. "After we landed, I spoke with several other passengers who witnessed the incident. 7 of them have agreed to provide statements. I have their contact information here." As Nathan thanked Hector, his own phone buzzed with a news alert. He looked down to see a live press conference featuring Thomas Blackwell, SkyRoute's Director of Security, standing at a podium with the airline's logo prominently displayed behind him. "SkyRoute Airways takes passenger safety seriously," Blackwell was saying, his expression grave. "While we regret that a minor was involved in yesterday's incident, we stand by our crew members' decision to neutralize a potential threat in the cabin. In today's world, we cannot afford to second-guess when safety is at stake." Diana's eyes narrowed as she watched the press conference. "They're doubling down." "Yes," Nathan agreed, his voice steady despite the anger churning inside him, which means we need to do the same. 15% of SkyRoute's workforce is minority. Layla reported, spreading documents across the hotel suite's dining table, but less than 3% of their management team. They've had 7 discrimination lawsuits in the past 5 years, all settled confidentially. Nathan nodded, making notes as Marcus slept in the bedroom. They had checked into a suite at the Riverside Hotel after his discharge, needing privacy to build their case away from the hospital's prying eyes. "What about Rebecca Winters specifically?" Nathan asked. Layla pulled out a folder. 15 years with the company. Started as a gate agent, promoted to flight attendant after 2 years. No public disciplinary record, but she paused. Tapping a document, I found 3 formal complaints filed against her in the past 2 years alone, all from passengers of color reporting hostile, aggressive behavior. And the outcomes of those complaints? All 3 were investigated internally and dismissed. Layla confirmed. The complaints disappeared into a black hole. And guess who oversees passenger complaints? Thomas Blackwell. Nathan surmised. Bingo! Vice President of Security for SkyRoute, former NYPD. And from what my sources tell me, a man with some very problematic views on race. Nathan frowned, studying the grainy photograph of Blackwell, a square-jawed man with cold eyes. Any connection to the Philadelphia police or Detective Wilson? Layla's smile was grim. I was wondering when you'd ask. Wilson and Blackwell are cousins by marriage. They go fishing together twice a year. That explains Wilson's attempt to make this go away, Nathan muttered. Diana emerged from the bedroom, gently closing the door behind her. Marcus is finally asleep, she said, her voice low. The nightmares woke him 3 times in the hospital. I'm hoping he'll rest better here. Nathan pulled out a chair for her. We're just going through what Layla's found on SkyRoute and the players involved. Diana sat heavily, the exhaustion of the past 36 hours evident in the shadows beneath her eyes. Have you seen the latest? She asked, sliding her tablet across the table. On the screen was a new headline, Sources Close to SkyRoute Incident. Reveal Teen's History of Behavioral Issues. Nathan scanned the article with growing outrage. It cited anonymous sources familiar with the situation, claiming that Marcus had a history of disciplinary problems at school and had been increasingly agitated throughout the flight. This is complete fiction, he growled. Marcus has never had so much as a detention. They're trying to damage his credibility, Layla observed. Standard playbook attack the victim's character to justify the aggressor's actions. Diana took back the tablet, her hand shaking slightly. How can they just lie like this? Because it works, Nathan replied grimly. People want simple narratives, good versus bad, right versus wrong. Nuance gets lost. If they can paint Marcus as a problem child, it becomes easier to believe he somehow deserved what happened to him. As they continued reviewing the documentation, Nathan's phone rang. The caller ID showed his law firm in Atlanta. Nathan, it's Carl. His partner's voice came through. I'm calling about the SkyRoute situation. It's all over the news down here. I'm handling it personally, Nathan replied. My family needs me here. That's just it, Carl said, his tone cautious. The partners met this morning. There's concern about you taking this case. Nathan straightened in his chair. Concern. My son was assaulted. I know, and we're all outraged on your behalf, Carl assured him quickly. But SkyRoute's parent company, Meridian Holdings, is connected to the Westfield Group. Nathan felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. The Westfield Group was one of their firm's largest clients. Are you saying the firm won't support me in this? I'm saying there are complications. The senior partners feel that you're too emotionally involved to see this objectively. They're suggesting you let another firm handle it one without our potential conflicts of interest. My son was tased for trying to use the bathroom, Nathan said quietly, his voice dangerously controlled. The same bathroom a white child used without incident. If the firm can't stand behind me on this, then perhaps I need to reconsider my position there. After a tense silence, Carl sighed. I'll relay your position to the partners. But Nathan tread carefully. These are powerful people you're going up against. As Nathan hung up, he found Diana and Layla watching him intently. The firm's backing out, Diana guessed. Nathan nodded. Not officially. Not yet. But they're feeling the pressure. What does that mean for us? Diana asked. It means I'll be taking a leave of absence, Nathan decided. This case is too important to compromise on. If necessary, I'll handle it independently. Before anyone could respond, Nathan's phone chimed with an email notification. He opened it to find a message from SkyRoute Airways legal department, Dr. Johnson. In the interest of resolving this unfortunate incident amicably, SkyRoute Airways is prepared to offer a settlement of $50,000 in exchange for a full release of all claims and a standard non-disclosure agreement. We believe this generous offer reflects our desire to put this matter behind us while acknowledging the distress your son may have experienced. Please respond at your earliest convenience. Sincerely, Catherine Montgomery, Chief Legal Counsel, SkyRoute Airways. Nathan showed the email to Diana and Layla. $50,000. Diana scoffed. For assaulting our child, for humiliating him, for treating him like a criminal. It's a starting offer, Layla noted. They're testing the waters, seeing if you can be bought off quickly and quietly. Nathan closed the email without responding. They want this to go away before it gains more traction. Before we can build our case. From the bedroom doorway came a small voice. Are you going to take it? They turned to see Marcus standing there, his hospital gown replaced with pajamas, but his posture still bearing the weight of his ordeal. No, Nathan said firmly. Not a chance. Marcus nodded, relief visible in his eyes. Good, because I keep thinking, what about other kids like me? If they can do this to me with my dad being a lawyer and everything, what happens to kids who don't have anyone to fight for them? Nathan felt a surge of pride through his concern. Despite everything, Marcus was thinking beyond himself, recognizing the broader implications of their struggle. Come here, Nathan said, opening his arms. As Marcus crossed the room to accept his father's embrace, Nathan made a silent vow. This wouldn't end with a check and a forced silence. It would end with accountability and change. We're going to fight this, he promised his son. All the way. The coffee shop on the outskirts of Philadelphia buzzed with the morning rush, the perfect cover for a meeting that couldn't happen in public view. Nathan sat at a corner table, his back to the wall, watching the door for the woman who had reached out to him through encrypted channels. Dr. Johnson. He looked up to see a petite woman in her early 30s, her dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. Though dressed in civilian clothes, she carried herself with the unmistakable posture of someone used to uniforms. Ms. Gonzalez, Nathan greeted her, standing to shake her hand. Thank you for coming. Isabella Gonzalez slid into the seat across from him, her movements efficient and guarded. Her eyes scanned the room before settling on Nathan's face. I can't stay long, she said, her voice low. I'm supposed to be at a training session in 30 minutes. You still work for SkyRoute? Nathan asked, surprised. Isabella nodded. For now, I'm a flight attendant based out of Miami. I was deadheading on Flight 1824, traveling as crew to position for my next assignment. Nathan processed this new information. So, you know Rebecca Winters professionally? Yes, Isabella confirmed. We've worked together on several routes. I'm not surprised by what happened, just that it was caught on camera this time. She glanced around once more, then slid a USB drive across the table. There's a reason Rebecca hasn't been fired, despite multiple complaints. She's protected by Blackwell. What happened to your son wasn't an isolated incident. It's part of an unofficial policy. What kind of policy? Nathan asked his lawyer's instinct, sensing a critical breakthrough. Isabella leaned closer. Blackwell calls it passenger management, but it's racial profiling. There are unwritten guidelines about which passengers to watch more closely, which ones to make examples of if they step out of line. Black passengers, especially black men and boys, are at the top of that list. Nathan's expression remained neutral, but his hand tightened around his coffee cup. And the tasers? Not standard issue, I presume. No, Isabella confirmed. But Blackwell has created a special security team of flight attendants who carry them. Rebecca is one of them. It's all unofficial with nothing in writing, but the message is clear. Why are you telling me this? Nathan asked. You're risking your job. Isabella's eyes welled with tears. Because I watched that video of your son, and I can't be part of this anymore. I've documented everything I could, including emails where Blackwell discusses how to handle difficult minorities. It's all on that drive. As Isabella prepared to leave, Nathan asked one more question. How high does this go? Is it just Blackwell? Isabella hesitated. The CEO, William Davidson, signs off on all security protocols. Whether he knows the details or just approves Blackwell's recommendations, that I don't know. But there are rumors that the board was briefed on a specialized security initiative last year. After Isabella left, Nathan stared at the USB drive, understanding that it contained not just evidence for their case, but potentially career-ending material for several SkyRoute executives. The stakes had just risen exponentially. Back at the hotel, Nathan shared Isabella's revelations with Diana and Layla. As they began reviewing the files, Nathan's phone rang with an unknown number. Dr. Johnson speaking, he answered cautiously. This is FBI agent Gabriel Morales. A deep voice responded without introduction. I'm calling about the incident involving your son, Marcus Johnson. I think we should talk. An hour later, Nathan sat on a bench in Rittenhouse Square Park, where Agent Morales had arranged to meet. The spring afternoon brought families and office workers to the urban oasis, providing the cover of normality that Morales had requested. The agent, a fit man in his early 40s with close-cropped hair and watchful eyes, approached without fanfare, sitting beside Nathan as if they were old friends catching up. Thank you for meeting me, Morales said, his dark suit immaculate despite the warm day. And I need to be clear, this conversation isn't happening officially. Nathan studied the man beside him. Why the cloak and dagger approach? Because SkyRoute Airways has friends in high places, Morales replied. And because what happened to your son wasn't an isolated incident. I've been quietly tracking a pattern of discriminatory security practices across multiple airlines, with SkyRoute being the worst offender. You're investigating them? Nathan asked. Morales nodded, keeping his voice low. Civil rights violations in interstate commerce fall under federal jurisdiction. I've been building a case for 8 months, but it's sensitive. The airline industry has powerful lobbyists who've already tried to shut down my investigation twice. Nathan processed this information, seeing both an ally and a potential complication. Why reach out to me now? Because your son's case has created a window of opportunity. The videos are too clear, too damning for the usual cover-up. But you need to know what you're up against. Thomas Blackwell isn't just some overzealous security VP. He's implementing a program of racial profiling disguised as security protocols. This confirmed what Isabella had told them. Nathan shared the information they'd gathered, including the existence of their whistleblower, though he protected Isabella's identity. Be careful, Morales warned. Blackwell has contacts throughout law enforcement and transportation security. The fact that your son is already being portrayed as the aggressor in some media outlets is no accident. As Nathan returned to the hotel, he found Diana watching the news with a mixture of hope and disbelief. Hector Ramirez, the retired principal who had defended Marcus on the plane, had appeared on a morning talk show with his own recording of the incident. His eloquent, measured account was providing a counter-narrative to SkyRoute's version. "I spent 30 years working with young people," Hector stated firmly to the camera. "I know threatening behavior when I see it. What I witnessed was a polite young man being treated as a threat solely because of the color of his skin." The interview was already going viral with Hector's #Truth4, Marcus gaining traction against the airline's preferred narrative. "He didn't have to do that," Marcus said quietly from the doorway, watching the screen with something like hope in his eyes for the first time since the incident. "Some people still recognize injustice when they see it," Nathan replied, placing a hand on his son's shoulder. Hector's interview seemed to break a dam. Over the next few days, more passengers from Flight 1824 came forward with their videos and testimonies. Their evidence made it increasingly difficult for SkyRoute to maintain their version of events. The full medical report was also released, confirming that Marcus had suffered cardiac stress from the taser information that further shifted public opinion. Seizing the momentum, Nathan formally filed a federal civil rights lawsuit against SkyRoute Airways, Rebecca Winters, and Thomas Blackwell. The complaint detailed not just Marcus's experience, but alleged a pattern of discriminatory practices targeting black passengers. SkyRoute's first response was predictable. They offered a settlement of $250,000 with a non-disclosure agreement. Nathan didn't even dignify it with a counteroffer. "They think they can buy our silence," he told Diana that night. "They have no idea who they're dealing with." The corner booth at Mancini's Diner provided just enough privacy for Nathan's meeting with Agent Morales. The agent had suggested the location, a busy establishment, where two men having coffee wouldn't attract attention, yet far enough from the financial district to avoid running into SkyRoute executives or their legal team. "My supervisor pulled me off the SkyRoute investigation yesterday," Morales said, without preamble, stirring his coffee methodically. "Said it was being reassigned to a task force, which is bureaucratic, speak for buried." Nathan frowned. "Because of our case," partly Morales confirmed. "But it's bigger than that. I've been told that key transportation regulatory agencies are suddenly stonewalling requests for information. Someone's applying pressure from above." "How high does this go?" Nathan asked. Morales leaned forward, lowering his voice. "SkyRoute's parent company, Meridian Holdings, has government contracts for executive transport. They fly cabinet members, diplomats, even occasional presidential staff. That creates relationships, the kind that can make investigations disappear." Nathan processed this information, understanding why his own law firm had been reluctant to challenge SkyRoute. "So, what happens now?" "Officially, I'm no longer investigating SkyRoute," Morales replied. "Unofficially, I believe in what I do. My father was one of the first Hispanic air marshals after 9/11. He joined because he believed in protecting people, not profiling them." "You're still helping us," Nathan realized. Why Morales' expression hardened. 3 years ago, my nephew was removed from a SkyRoute flight for suspicious behavior. He was reading a book in Arabic. He's a linguistics student. The airline claimed he made other passengers uncomfortable. No taser that time, just humiliation and a missed funeral. "I'm sorry," Nathan said quietly. "Don't be sorry," Morales replied. "Be relentless. Your civil case can accomplish what my investigation couldn't, public exposure. But you need to know they'll fight dirty." As they continued talking, Morales provided insights into SkyRoute's security operations. How Blackwell had militarized what should have been customer service. How certain flight attendants were selected for special training in passenger management techniques, and how incidents involving minority passengers were systematically downplayed or buried. The tasers aren't even the worst part, Morales revealed. It's the culture they've created. one where certain passengers are presumed threatening until proven otherwise. As their meeting concluded, Morales slid a business card across the table. My personal number. Use it if you need me, but be discreet. And watch your back. Blackwell has resources beyond what you might expect for an airline security director. Nathan pocketed the card. Thank you for everything. Back at the hotel, Nathan found Diana and Marcus preparing to return to Atlanta. With Marcus's medical clearance secured and their initial legal filings complete, they had decided it was best to continue their fight from home territory. We got something while you were out, Diana said, handing Nathan a certified letter. The first formal response to our lawsuit. Nathan opened the envelope to find a motion to dismiss filed by Catherine Montgomery, SkyRoute's chief legal counsel. The motion argued that federal aviation regulations gave flight attendants broad discretion in maintaining cabin safety, that Marcus's behavior constituted non-compliance with crew instructions, regardless of intent, and that there was no evidence of racial motivation in Rebecca Winter's actions. Standard first move, Nathan noted, scanning the document. They're hoping to kill this before discovery can begin. Will it work? Marcus asked, his voice smaller than usual. Nathan shook his head. Not a chance. They're underestimating the evidence we already have and what we're going to find. As they packed for their flight home on a different airline, Nathan received a text from Layla. Office surveillance shows someone tried to access our files last night. Security system prevented entry, but they knew what they were looking for. We're being watched. Nathan showed the message to Diana, keeping it from Marcus's view. This is escalating faster than I expected. Diana's expression hardened with maternal determination. Let them watch. Let them worry. We have truth on our side. As they prepared to leave, Nathan took one last call from Hector Ramirez. I wanted you to know, Hector said, his voice tinged with pride. 7 more passengers have contacted me after seeing the interview. They all want to testify about what they saw. The tide is turning, Dr. Johnson. Thank you, Hector, Nathan replied. For everything you've done, no thanks needed, the retired principal responded. When we see injustice and remain silent, we become part of the problem. I couldn't let that happen to your boy. As they boarded their flight home, Nathan noticed Marcus hesitate at the entrance to the plane, his body tensing involuntarily. It's okay, Nathan said quietly. I'm right here. Marcus nodded, taking a deep breath before stepping onto the aircraft. It was a small victory, but an important one. The fight ahead would be difficult, but in that moment, Nathan saw that his son still had the courage to move forward, and that perhaps was the most important victory of all. This is a PR nightmare, not a legal crisis. William Davidson insisted, his voice carrying across SkyRoute Airways' executive boardroom on the 40th floor of their Atlanta headquarters. As CEO, Davidson had built the airline into the nation's 4th largest carrier through ruthless efficiency and political savvy. At 58, his silver hair and custom suits projected authority, while his former military service gave him credibility when speaking about security matters. With all due respect, Sir Catherine Montgomery countered, it's both. As SkyRoute's chief legal counsel, Montgomery had handled numerous lawsuits against the airline, but even she recognized this one was different. The Johnson case has elements that make it particularly dangerous. Sympathetic plaintiff, clear video evidence, multiple witnesses, and a father who happens to be one of the country's most effective civil rights attorneys. Thomas Blackwell leaned forward, his square jaw tight with frustration. The flight attendant followed protocol. The boy was non-compliant during a safety announcement. She tased a 14-year-old, Tom Montgomery replied sharply. For trying to use the bathroom, the same bathroom a white child used moments earlier without incident. The optics couldn't be worse. Optics, Blackwell scoffed. We're talking about aircraft security, not a fashion show. Davidson raised a hand, silencing the brewing argument. What's our exposure here, Catherine? Worst case scenario. Montgomery consulted her notes. Financially, 7 to 8 figures if it goes to a jury. But the greater risk is regulatory. This could trigger investigations from the FAA, the Department of Transportation, and potentially the Justice Department's Civil Rights Division. Davidson frowned. And operationally, consumer boycotts are already organizing on social media, reported Angela Mercer, SkyRoute's head of public relations. We're seeing cancellations particularly from corporate accounts sensitive to diversity issues. Delta and United are already running ads emphasizing their respectful passenger experience policies. This could have been contained if we'd acted immediately, Montgomery noted. A swift termination of the flight attendant, a sincere apology, a reasonable settlement offer. Absolutely not. Blackwell interrupted. Firing Rebecca would be an admission of wrongdoing and would destroy crew morale. She's one of our most experienced flight attendants, and she made a split-second decision in what she perceived as a threatening situation. A threatening situation involving a child asking to use the bathroom, Montgomery challenged. You weren't there, Blackwell retorted. In today's world, we can't afford to second-guess our frontline personnel when security is at stake. From the far end of the table, a voice rarely heard in such meetings spoke up. I have concerns about our position here. All heads turned towards Sarah Daniels, the airline's vice president of customer experience. A 20-year veteran of the company who had worked her way up from gate agent Daniels had privately questioned Blackwell's security approaches for years. What concerned Sarah Davidson asked, his tone indicating surprise at her intervention. I've reviewed the footage, Daniels said carefully. Multiple angles. I've also spoken with several of our crew who were present. This wasn't a security incident. It was a customer service failure that escalated unnecessarily. If we defend this, we're sending a message to our staff that profiling is acceptable company policy. Blackwell's face reddened. Your department isn't responsible for security protocols. No, Daniels agreed, but we are responsible for the damage control when those protocols go wrong. And they're going wrong with increasing frequency, Tom. The complaints are piling up, and they show a clear pattern. Anecdotes aren't data, Blackwell dismissed. Actually, Daniels countered, sliding a folder across the table. I've had my team tracking incident reports for the past 18 months. The numbers show a 340% increase in security interventions involving minority passengers since your enhanced protocols were implemented. That's not anecdotal. That's a liability. Davidson studied the faces around the table, weighing the competing perspectives. What's Johnson asking for? He hasn't specified damages yet, Montgomery replied. But based on his case history, he'll want far more than money. Policy changes, public accountability, maybe even oversight of our security protocols. Unacceptable, Blackwell said flatly. My team maintains the highest standards of professionalism. We don't need external oversight. Davidson nodded thoughtfully. Our board meeting is next week. Several members have already expressed concerns about this situation. We need a unified strategy. He turned to Montgomery. Fight the motion to dismiss aggressively. Spare no expense. If we lose that round, come back with a more substantial settlement offer, $1 million with the usual confidentiality provisions. And if Johnson won't settle, Montgomery asked. Then we make it clear what he's up against. Davidson replied, his tone hardening. This company has resources he can't imagine. Make sure he understands that before he drags his son through a prolonged legal battle. After the meeting dispersed, Blackwell remained behind with Davidson. Will, there's something else you should know, Blackwell said once they were alone. We may have a leak. Someone with access to internal communications about our enhanced security protocols. Davidson's expression darkened. How serious? Potentially very. We've implemented tracking measures on all internal systems, but some of the older communications may already be compromised. Find the leak, Davidson ordered. Whatever it takes. Blackwell nodded. There's one more thing. Johnson's history. What about it? He represented a discrimination case against Meridian Holdings 6 years ago, one of our subsidiaries before the merger. It was settled confidentially, but he might have insights into corporate structure that most outside attorneys wouldn't. Davidson processed this information. So this could be personal for him. It might be Blackwell confirmed, which means he won't be easily bought off. Everyone has a price, Tom Davidson replied. We just need to figure out what Johnson's is, or what he fears losing. As Blackwell left, Davidson remained at the boardroom window, gazing out at the Atlanta skyline. In 30 years of corporate leadership, he had weathered numerous storms, economic downturns, fuel crises, union disputes, even a bankruptcy, restructuring. But this situation felt different. The public mood was shifting, becoming less tolerant of the security at all costs mentality that had dominated the post-9/11 era. Still, he had not built an airline empire by backing down from challenges. If Nathan Johnson wanted a fight, he would get one with all the resources a multi-billion-dollar corporation could bring to bear. Sarah Daniels lingered in the hallway outside, a sense of unease settling in her stomach. She had finally spoken up after years of silent concern, but she doubted it would make a difference. As she walked back to her office, she wondered how much longer she could remain part of a system she increasingly questioned. Marcus Johnson scrolled through his phone, his expression darkening with each swipe. It had been 2 weeks since the incident on Flight 1824, and a coordinated campaign to discredit him was gaining traction across social media and certain news outlets. Dad, he called from the living room of their Atlanta home. They're saying I was suspended from school last year for fighting. That never happened. Nathan looked up from his legal briefs, setting aside the documents to join his son on the couch. On Marcus's phone screen was an article titled, "The Troubled Past of Marcus Johnson, What the Media Isn't Telling You." The piece claimed that Marcus had a history of disciplinary problems at school and had been involved in several confrontations with authority figures. Every word is fiction, Nathan said, his voice tight with controlled anger. You've never been in trouble at school. They interviewed someone claiming to be my former teacher. Marcus continued, his voice hollow, saying I had impulse control issues and problems with authority. Diana entered from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a towel. Let me see that, she said, taking the phone. As she read, her expression shifted from concern to outrage. Mrs. Harrison, she's never taught at your school. This is complete fabrication. That's how they operate. Nathan explained, his voice steady despite his fury. They create a counter-narrative using fictional sources that most people won't bother to verify. Once it's out there, the damage is done even when it's proven false later. But why would they make up lies about me? Marcus asked, the hurt evident in his voice. I'm just a kid. Because you're a threat to them, Nathan replied gently. Not physically, but to their image, their stock price, their leadership. Your story exposes something they've worked hard to hide, that their security protocols aren't about keeping people safe. They're about control and discrimination. Marcus nodded slowly, processing his father's words. Some kids at school saw the articles. They've been asking if I really got kicked out of my last school for fighting. Diana sat beside her son, putting an arm around his shoulders. What did you tell them? That it's not true, Marcus replied. But some of them don't believe me. Jackson Miller told everyone I was probably acting crazy on the plane and deserved what happened. Nathan felt a surge of protective anger. We'll speak to the principal. This kind of harassment shouldn't be tolerated. No, Marcus said quickly. That would just make it worse. I don't want special treatment. Remember when we built that model rocket last summer? Nathan asked, suddenly changing direction. The one that kept veering off course. Marcus looked confused by the shift but nodded. Yeah, We had to recalibrate the fins 3 times. And you got so frustrated after the second crash that you wanted to quit. Nathan continued. But what did you say after we finally got it right? A small smile touched Marcus's face. That sometimes you have to keep going even when it seems impossible. Exactly. Nathan squeezed his son's shoulder. This is like that. They want you to crash and give up. Our job is to keep recalibrating until we fly straight and true. Marcus's posture relaxed slightly at the familiar metaphor. This was their language rockets and flight, the shared passion that had always connected father and son. Before Nathan could say more, his phone rang. It was Carl, his law partner. Nathan, have you seen the post this morning? Carl asked without preamble. No, why? There's a piece questioning your litigation history. They're framing you as an activist attorney who targets corporations for political purposes rather than legitimate legal grievances. They've dug up quotes from old cases taken completely out of context. Nathan wasn't surprised. They're following the playbook discredit the victim, then discredit the advocate. It gets worse, Carl continued. The managing partners are calling an emergency meeting. The Westfield Group is threatening to pull their business if the firm continues to support your case against SkyRoute. Let me guess, Nathan said, bitterly. The partners are considering asking for my resignation. Carl's silence was answer enough. After ending the call, Nathan turned to find Diana watching him, concern etched on her face. They're coming after your job, she surmised. It was inevitable, Nathan replied. SkyRoute's parent company has tentacles throughout Atlanta's business community. They're applying pressure wherever they can. As if to confirm his assessment, Diana's phone buzzed with an email notification. She opened it, her face paling as she read. It's from the medical board, she said. They've received multiple complaints about my professional conduct and are opening a review. They're suggesting I take a voluntary leave while it's investigated. What complaints? Nathan demanded. You're one of the most respected nurses at Atlanta Memorial. That's just it. There are no specific allegations, just vague references to professional concerns raised by multiple sources. Nathan took her hand. This is harassment, plain and simple. They're targeting our livelihoods to pressure us into dropping the case. What do we do? Diana asked, her voice steady, despite the threat to her career. Before Nathan could answer, Marcus spoke up. We fight back. Isn't that what you always taught me, Dad? That backing down from bullies only encourages them. Nathan looked at his son with a mixture of pride and concern. The boy who had boarded Flight 1824, excited about his first plane ride, was gone. In his place was a young man being forced to confront the harsh realities of power and privilege in America. It broke Nathan's heart, but it also strengthened his resolve. Yes, he agreed. We fight back. But we do it smart, not angry. They want us to make mistakes, to react emotionally. We won't give them that satisfaction. That evening, as the Johnson family developed their strategy for countering the smear campaign, Nathan received a call from Layla. Someone broke into my office last night, she reported, her voice tight with anger. They knew exactly what they were looking for. All the files related to Marcus's case are gone, including my notes on our whistleblower. Nathan immediately thought of Isabella Gonzalez. Was there anything that could identify her? No names, but there were details someone could use to narrow it down. We need to warn her. When they tried to contact Isabella, however, they discovered her phone had been disconnected. A discreet inquiry revealed she had suddenly taken extended personal leave from SkyRoute. The digital dimension of the attack became clear when Layla's investigation uncovered evidence that SkyRoute had hired a reputation management firm specializing in social media manipulation. The firm was operating thousands of bot accounts to push narratives favorable to the airline, and attack Marcus's credibility. They're spending more on covering this up than it would cost to simply acknowledge wrongdoing and implement real changes, Nathan observed grimly. As the attacks escalated, the Johnson family found themselves increasingly isolated. Friends and colleagues began distancing themselves, concerned about association with such a controversial case. Invitations dried up. Phone calls went unreturned. "They're trying to isolate us," Diana noted one evening as they ate dinner in uncharacteristic silence. "Make us feel alone and unsupported." "It's working," Marcus admitted quietly. "I lost 3 more friends at school today. Their parents told them to stay away from me." Nathan reached across the table, squeezing his son's hand. "Real friends stand by you when things get difficult. Anyone who walks away now isn't someone you need in your life." "Is that supposed to make me feel better?" Marcus asked, a rare flash of anger breaking through his usual composure. "No," Nathan acknowledged. "It's supposed to make you stronger. This is the hard truth about fighting for what's right. Sometimes you have to do it alone." Diana shot her husband a warning look. "You're not alone, Marcus. You have us, and you have people like Hector Ramirez and Isabella Gonzalez, who are risking just as much to stand with you." Marcus nodded, but the weight of the past 2 weeks was evident in the slump of his shoulders. The smear campaign was taking its toll, not just on their public reputation, but on their spirits. Later that night, after Marcus had gone to bed, Nathan found Diana in their home office, reviewing the latest allegations against her nursing practice. "We could still settle," she said quietly, not looking up from her computer. "Take their money and put this behind us. Let Marcus have a normal life again." Nathan sat beside her. "Is that what you really want?" Diana finally met his eyes, her own bright with unshed tears. "Of course not. But I'm watching our son withdraw more each day. I'm seeing friends and colleagues turn their backs on us. I'm facing the possibility of losing my nursing license over fabricated complaints. At what point does the cost become too high?" "If we back down now," Nathan said gently, "we teach Marcus that money can buy silence, that power can evade accountability, that justice is only for those who can afford to fight indefinitely. Is that the lesson we want him to learn from this?" Diana sighed, leaning her head against her husband's shoulder. "No, but I want him to know there's still good in the world too. That standing up for what's right doesn't always mean losing everything else. Then we'll show him that Nathan promised, by continuing to fight and by making sure he sees every person who stands with us, not just those who walk away." As they held each other in the quiet of their home, surrounded by the evidence of a campaign meant to destroy them, they drew strength from a shared conviction. What had been done to their son was wrong, and no amount of pressure would make them pretend otherwise. Effective immediately, your contract with Westwood Academy will not be renewed for the coming academic year. Hector Ramirez stared at the letter in his hands, the formal language doing little to disguise the reality he was being fired after 3 decades of service to education, 2 of them at this prestigious private academy, where he taught history part-time during his semi-retirement. The official reason cited budgetary constraints, but Hector knew better. His termination came just 1 week after his nationally televised interview defending Marcus Johnson. "You can't possibly believe this is a coincidence," he said to Headmaster Phillips, who sat uncomfortably behind his desk, avoiding Hector's direct gaze. "The board's decision is final." Mr. Ramirez Phillips replied, his tone carefully neutral. "We appreciate your contributions to Westwood Academy and will provide a positive reference for your future endeavors." James Hector said, using the headmaster's first name as they had been colleagues for years. "We both know what this is about. Who on the board has connections to SkyRoute Airways?" Philip shifted in his chair. "I'm not at liberty to discuss board matters." Margaret Whitfield Hector continued naming one of the Academy's most prominent board members. Her husband sits on Meridian Holdings' executive committee, SkyRoute's parent company. Am I getting warm? The headmaster's silence confirmed Hector's suspicion. 30 years in education, Hector said quietly. Recognized twice by the governor for excellence in teaching. A perfect record. And you're firing me because I told the truth about what happened to a child on an airplane. It's more complicated than that, Phillips began. No. Hector interrupted. It's exactly that simple. And you know it. As Hector left the headmaster's office for the last time, he found a group of his students waiting in the corridor. Word of his termination had already spread through the school's rapid rumor mill. Is it true? Mr. Ramirez asked Emma Chen, one of his most promising students. They're firing you because of that interview. About the boy on the plane. Hector considered sugarcoating the truth, then decided against it. These young people deserved honesty. Yes, Emma, that appears to be the case. But that's not fair, protested another student, Michael Rivera. You were just telling the truth about what you saw. Life isn't always fair, Hector acknowledged. But that doesn't mean we stop standing up for what's right. What are you going to do? Emma asked. Hector smiled, feeling a surge of pride in these young people and their sense of justice. I'm going to keep telling the truth, and I'm going to trust that eventually the truth matters more than power or money. That afternoon, as Hector cleared out his classroom, his phone rang. The caller ID showed Nathan Johnson. Hector, Nathan said when he answered, I just heard what happened at Westwood. I'm so sorry. Don't be, Hector replied with more calm than he felt. I knew there might be consequences when I spoke up. We'll add wrongful termination to the lawsuit, Nathan offered. Retaliation against a witness is... No, Hector interrupted. This isn't about me. It's about Marcus and what happened to him. Keep the focus there. After a moment of silence, Nathan asked, Are you sure they can't be allowed to get away with this? They haven't gotten away with anything, Hector said firmly. They can take my job, but they can't take my integrity. I saw what happened to your son, and I won't be silenced. As news of Hector's firing spread, it triggered an unexpected backlash. Students at Westwood Academy organized a petition demanding his reinstatement. Parents, many unaware of the board's connections to SkyRoute, began asking uncomfortable questions about the real reason for dismissing such a respected educator. Local news outlets picked up the story, connecting it to the broader Marcus Johnson case. Teacher fired after defending tased. Teen read one headline accompanied by a photograph of Hector standing outside Westwood Academy's gates. 3 days after his termination, Hector received a visit from an unexpected ally, Judge Carlos Vega of the State Appellate Court, whose granddaughter attended Westwood. This isn't right, Hector, Judge Vega said, as they sat in Hector's modest living room. You've dedicated your life to education, to teaching young people to think critically and stand up for what's right. And this is how they repay you. Hector shrugged. It's not about gratitude, Carlos. It's about power. SkyRoute is flexing its muscles, showing what happens to people who challenge them. Well, two can play at that game, the judge replied. I've spoken with several other parents from Westwood. We're organizing a legal defense fund for you, and we're demanding an emergency board meeting to review this decision. You don't have to do that, Hector protested. Yes, we do, Judge Vega insisted. Not just for you, but for our children. What message does it send if we allow a teacher to be fired for telling the truth? What are we teaching the next generation about courage and integrity? The judge's intervention proved decisive. Faced with mounting pressure from parents, students, and now prominent community members, the Westwood Academy Board convened an emergency session. 3 days later, Hector received another letter, this one offering reinstatement with a formal apology and back pay for the period of his termination. When Hector called Nathan to share the news, the attorney's voice carried both relief and vindication. This is the first crack in their wall, Hector. People are starting to push back. It's a small victory, Hector cautioned. Sometimes, small victories are what keep us going, Nathan replied. Marcus asked about you yesterday. He's been worried. Tell him I'm fine, Hector said. And tell him something else. Tell him that what happened to him has awakened something in people. They're beginning to see the pattern to question things they accepted before. After they hung up, Hector sat on his porch watching the sunset paint the Atlanta sky in shades of orange and purple. At 62, he had seen America change in many ways throughout his lifetime. He had witnessed the slow, painful progress toward equality and the fierce resistance to that progress. What had happened to Marcus Johnson wasn't new. What was new was the reaction, the refusal of ordinary people to accept the official narrative, to look away from injustice, because confronting it was uncomfortable. As darkness fell, Hector felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Genuine hope that the arc of history might indeed be bending toward justice, however slowly and painfully. Layla Robinson moved silently through the darkness of her office, her former FBI training evident in every careful step. Though she had left the bureau years ago, some habits remained, like checking her workspace after hours when something felt wrong. Tonight, something definitely felt wrong. The lock on her office door had shown microscopic scratches, signs of amateur tampering that most would miss, but that Layla's trained eye had immediately detected. Inside, everything looked normal at first glance, but the hairs she had placed across certain drawers as primitive alarm systems were disturbed. Someone had been here searching for something. Using her phone's flashlight, Layla began a methodical inspection of the office. The filing cabinet containing the Johnson case materials showed signs of forced entry, subtle but present. The digital backup drive she kept locked in her desk was missing. Most concerning the notes she had compiled on Isabella Gonzalez were gone, along with the preliminary background research on Thomas Blackwell and SkyRoute's security protocols. Layla didn't call the police. Given what Agent Morales had told them about law enforcement connections to SkyRoute, she couldn't be certain whose side local officers might be on. Instead, she called Nathan. "They've been in my office," she reported. "Professional job, but not top tier. Corporate security rather than government trained." Blackwell's people, Nathan surmised. What did they get enough to identify Isabella, maybe other potential witnesses? "They also took my research on SkyRoute's security structure." "What about the USB drive Isabella gave us?" Safe, Layla confirmed. "I never keep critical evidence in my office, but they'll know we have it based on my notes. We need to warn Isabella," Nathan said. "If we can find her." Layla had already been searching. Her apartment in Miami is empty. Neighbor says she left in a hurry 2 days ago. No forwarding address. Her family in Albuquerque claims they haven't heard from her. Social media accounts inactive since last week. She's running, Nathan realized. Blackwell must have identified her as the leak. Or she's hiding, Layla suggested. Either way, our key witness is currently unreachable. As they discussed next steps, a text message arrived on Nathan's phone from an unknown number car outside your house for past 3 hours. Black SUV, tinted windows. "Stay vigilant. M. Morales," Nathan said, showing Layla the message. "We're being watched." The surveillance proved to be just the beginning. Over the next week, the Johnson family discovered they were being followed almost constantly, to work, to school, to medical appointments. Black SUVs with tinted windows maintained a discreet but unmistakable presence wherever they went. "They want us to know we're being watched," Nathan explained to Diana and Marcus during a family meeting. "It's psychological pressure making us feel exposed, vulnerable." "Is it legal for them to follow us like this?" Marcus asked. "In public spaces, yes," Nathan confirmed. "As long as they don't trespass or directly harass us, there's little we can legally do to stop them." The digital dimension of the surveillance became apparent when Nathan discovered unusual activity on their home network. An IT security specialist he trusted confirmed what he suspected: someone had attempted to access their personal devices remotely. "They're trying to gather information, find weaknesses, maybe plant something they can use against us. Nathan explained to Diana after Marcus had gone to bed. We need to be extremely careful about what we say electronically. Diana's face showed the strain of living under constant observation. How long can this go on, Nathan? We're essentially prisoners in our own lives. Until the hearing on their motion to dismiss, Nathan replied. If we survive that, they'll either escalate or offer a more substantial settlement. Either way, something will change. The motion hearing was still 3 weeks away. 3 more weeks of being watched followed and psychologically pressured. For Marcus, the situation was becoming unbearable. Already dealing with the trauma of the tasing and the social fallout at school, the constant surveillance added another layer of stress to his daily life. One evening, Nathan found his son sitting alone in the backyard, staring at the fence line, where they suspected cameras had been placed to monitor their home. "You okay, buddy?" Nathan asked, sitting beside him on the garden bench. Marcus shook his head. "I want this to be over, Dad. I want my life back." The defeat in his son's voice cut Nathan deeply. "I know this is hard." "You don't know," Marcus interrupted, a rare flash of anger breaking through his usual composure. "You're not the one who was tased. You're not the one people are calling a liar and a troublemaker. You get to be the crusading attorney fighting for justice. I'm just the victim everyone pities or blames." Nathan absorbed his son's words, recognizing the truth in them. "You're right. I don't know exactly how this feels for you. And if you want to end this, if you want us to accept their settlement offer and put it all behind us, we can do that. This has to be your choice, Marcus, not mine." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, considering his father's words. "Would it change anything?" he finally asked. "If we took their money and signed their papers, would it stop the next kid from being treated like I was?" "Probably not," Nathan admitted. "The system would continue as it is." Marcus nodded slowly. "Then what's the point? We'd just be letting them buy their way out of responsibility." Again. Nathan felt a surge of pride mixed with sorrow. His son understood the stakes with a clarity that many adults lacked, but that understanding came at a high personal cost. "Whatever you decide," Nathan said, "Mom and I will support you. This isn't just my fight, it's yours. It has to be worth it to you." Marcus looked up at the darkening sky where stars were beginning to appear. "Remember when I was excited about seeing the clouds from above? That seems like a lifetime ago. We'll get that wonder back," Nathan promised. Somehow, as they sat together in the growing darkness, Nathan's phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Layla. "Found Isabella. She's safe, but scared. Meeting tomorrow, secure location. Bring Morales if possible." A glimmer of hope in the darkness. Their key witness was alive and willing to talk. The case was still alive. "Good news?" Marcus asked, noting his father's expression. "Potentially," Nathan replied. "A reminder that we're not fighting alone." Marcus nodded, some of the tension leaving his shoulders. "Okay then, we keep going." As they headed back inside, Nathan glanced toward the black SUV, still parked at the end of their street, a reminder that the battle was far from over, and that powerful forces were still determined to silence them, whatever the cost. "I'm not testifying." Marcus's words fell like stones in the quiet of the Johnson family living room. 3 days before the crucial hearing on SkyRoute's motion to dismiss his declaration, stunned both his parents. "Marcus," Diana began carefully, "are you sure about this? Your testimony is central to the case." "I'm sure," Marcus replied, his voice steady, despite the emotion in his eyes. "I'm done being the victim. That's all I am now, the black kid who got tased on a plane, at school, online, everywhere I go." Nathan studied his son, seeing not just the determination in his stance, but the exhaustion behind it. 6 weeks of constant pressure, surveillance, social isolation, media scrutiny had taken their toll. "This isn't a decision you need to make tonight," Nathan said gently. "Why don't we—" "I've already decided," Marcus interrupted. "I don't want to be a victim anymore. I don't want to be a symbol or a hashtag or whatever. I just want to be Marcus again." The pain in his voice silenced both his parents. This was the crisis point they had feared, the moment when the personal cost became too great to bear. Diana moved to sit beside her son on the couch. "You are still Marcus," she said softly. "Nothing they've done changes who you are." "Doesn't it?" Marcus challenged. "I can't sleep without nightmares. I flinch when people raise their voices. I check every room for exits now. I'm different, and I hate it." Nathan felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. Had his pursuit of justice come at too high a price for his son? Had his professional instincts overridden his parental duty to protect Marcus from further harm? Later that night, long after Diana and Marcus had gone to bed, Nathan sat alone in his home office, the only light coming from his desk lamp. The case files were spread before him, but he wasn't seeing them. Instead, he was seeing his son's face, the pain, the exhaustion, the plea to just be normal again. "What am I doing?" he whispered to the empty room. The question echoed in his mind unanswered. Nathan had spent his career fighting for justice, believing that accountability was worth any personal sacrifice. But this wasn't his sacrifice to make, it was Marcus's. And his son was clearly reaching his breaking point. A terrible thought crept in. What if winning this case cost him his son's well-being? What if the price of justice was Marcus's happiness, his sense of security, his childhood? His hands trembled slightly as he reached for the settlement offer that still sat in his inbox. $1 million. No admission of wrongdoing, but no gag order either. They could take the money, close this chapter, give Marcus a chance to heal. The cursor hovered over the reply button. It would be so easy. One email and the surveillance would end. The social isolation would fade. Marcus could begin rebuilding his life. "You once told me that justice isn't what's convenient. It's what's right, even when it hurts." Nathan turned to find Diana standing in the doorway, watching him with understanding in her eyes. "How did you know what I was thinking?" he asked. She smiled sadly. "Because I've been thinking the same thing. It would be so much easier to just take their money and walk away. If this were just about us," Nathan began. "But it's not," Diana finished. "It's about every child who might face what Marcus did if nothing changes." Nathan nodded, the cursor still hovering over the email. "But at what cost to our son? I don't know," Diana admitted, crossing the room to sit on the edge of his desk. "That's the impossible choice, isn't it? The greater good versus our child's immediate well-being. Maybe we should let Marcus decide," Nathan suggested. "It's his life that's been most affected." "He's 14, Nathan. That's a lot to put on a child's shoulders." "He's not just any child," Nathan replied. "And after what he's been through, treating him like he can't understand the stakes seems wrong." Diana considered this. "You're right. We'll talk to him again tomorrow. Together." As she turned to leave, Nathan caught her hand. "Thank you." "For what?" "For reminding me why we're doing this. For being the compass when I lose direction." Diana squeezed his hand. "That's marriage, Nathan. Sometimes you lead, sometimes I do. We'll figure this out." The next day, before they could have their planned family discussion, an unexpected visitor arrived at their home. Hector Ramirez stood on their porch, water dripping from his coat despite the sunny weather. "I apologize for coming by unannounced," Hector said when Nathan opened the door. "But I thought Marcus might want to meet someone." Behind Hector stood a teenage boy, perhaps 16 or 17, his expression nervous but determined. "This is Jason Rivera." Hector introduced him. 3 months ago, he was removed from a SkyRoute flight for suspicious behavior, which turned out to be reading an Arabic textbook for his language class. Jason stepped forward, extending his hand to Nathan. Mr. Ramirez thought it might help Marcus to talk to someone who's been through something similar. Nathan invited them in, calling Marcus down from his room. The teenager appeared wary at first, but as Jason shared his experience, the humiliation, the lingering anxiety, the feelings of powerlessness, Marcus began to engage. "Did you ever get over it?" Marcus asked Jason directly. Jason considered the question carefully. "Not completely. I still get nervous in airports. But what helped was realizing I wasn't alone, that what happened to me wasn't about me personally, but about a pattern. And then I saw your story on the news." And Marcus prompted when Jason paused. "And I realized that maybe if someone finally fought back hard enough, things could change. That maybe what happened to me and to you wouldn't have to happen to someone else." The two teenagers continued talking, moving to the kitchen for privacy. Nathan, Diana, and Hector remained in the living room, giving them space. "How did you find Jason?" Nathan asked Hector quietly. "After I spoke out about Marcus, I started receiving messages from other families, people who had experienced similar treatment, but hadn't had the means or platform to challenge it. Jason's story was particularly similar, and he lives here in Atlanta." "Thank you for bringing him," Diana said sincerely. "Marcus has been struggling with feeling isolated in this experience." "That's exactly what they want," Hector noted. "Isolation makes victims easier to discredit and demoralize. Community does the opposite." When the teenagers rejoined them later, Marcus's demeanor had subtly shifted. The defeated slump of his shoulders was gone, replaced by a straightness that hadn't been present in weeks. "Dad," he said, as Hector and Jason prepared to leave, "I want to keep going with the case." "Are you sure?" Nathan asked. "What changed your mind?" Marcus glanced at Jason, then back to his father. "I'm still scared of testifying. I'm still scared of facing her again. But I'm more scared of nothing changing, of other kids going through this with no one to stand up for them." As Hector and Jason departed, the Johnson family gathered in the living room once more. The crisis hadn't fully passed. Marcus's fears were still real, the challenges ahead still daunting, but something fundamental had shifted. "I don't want to be just a victim," Marcus said with new resolve. "I want to be part of the change." Nathan nodded, pride swelling in his chest, despite his ongoing concerns. "Then that's what we'll do. Together." As the rain continued outside, the Johnson family began planning their approach to the hearing, their shared purpose providing a strength that individual determination alone could not. The federal courthouse in Atlanta imposed a sense of gravity with its imposing columns and marble floors. Nathan Johnson had walked these halls hundreds of times throughout his career, but never with so much personally at stake as he did the morning of the hearing on SkyRoute's motion to dismiss. Marcus and Diana sat in the gallery behind him, along with Hector Ramirez, Layla Robinson, and several passengers from Flight 1824 who had come to show support. On the other side of the aisle, SkyRoute executives filled the first row, including Thomas Blackwell, whose cold stare followed Nathan's every move. Judge Elaine Harrington, a veteran jurist with a reputation for meticulous attention to legal detail, presided over the packed courtroom. The case had drawn national attention, with civil rights organizations filing amicus briefs supporting the Johnsons, while airline industry associations backed SkyRoute. Catherine Montgomery rose to present SkyRoute's motion, her tailored suit and pearl necklace projecting polished confidence. At 45, she had built her reputation defending corporate clients in high-stakes litigation, earning both respect and fear in legal circles for her strategic brilliance and uncompromising style. "Your Honor." She began this case while emotionally compelling, fails to meet the legal standards required, to proceed to trial. Federal aviation regulations grant flight attendants broad discretion in maintaining cabin safety. These regulations recognize that at 30,000 feet, crew members must make split-second decisions without the luxury of committee deliberation or second-guessing. Montgomery moved away from the podium, her voice carrying throughout the courtroom. The plaintiff's allegations, even if taken as true, describe a regrettable but legally justified exercise of that discretion. When a passenger refuses to comply with safety instructions, in this case, the illuminated seatbelt sign, crew members are not just permitted but obligated to take necessary actions to maintain order. She paused, allowing her argument to settle. As for the allegations of racial discrimination, the plaintiff offers only subjective impressions and selective comparisons. There is no evidence that Ms. Winter's actions were motivated by racial animus rather than legitimate safety concerns. Montgomery returned to the podium, her conclusion measured and reasonable sounding. Your Honor, if passengers are allowed to second-guess safety instructions based on perceived disparate treatment, the entire aviation security framework becomes unworkable. We respectfully request that this case be dismissed. When Nathan's turn came, he approached the podium with calm purpose. His dark suit was understated, but impeccable, his manner reflecting years of courtroom experience. But today, there was something more in his bearing, the unmistakable resolve of a father defending his child. Your Honor, he began this case is not about questioning legitimate safety protocols. It's about an airline employee using a prohibited weapon against a child who simply asked to use the restroom, a request that had been granted to a white child moments earlier. Nathan methodically dismantled Montgomery's arguments, pointing out that SkyRoute's own written procedures prohibited the use of tasers, that Marcus's actions did not meet any reasonable definition of threatening behavior, and that the growing evidence of widespread racial profiling within the airline couldn't be dismissed as coincidental. The question before this court is not whether flight attendants have authority to maintain cabin safety. Of course they do. The question is whether that authority includes the right to electrocute a black child for doing exactly what a white child did without consequence. As Nathan continued, he noted Judge Harrington's careful attention to his evidence, particularly the documentation showing that tasers were not authorized equipment for flight attendants under FAA regulations, and the video comparison showing Rebecca Winter's starkly different treatment of passengers based on race. Your Honor, he concluded, when a 14-year-old honor student can be tased simply for requesting to use a bathroom, we have moved beyond the realm of reasonable safety measures into something far more disturbing, a pattern of discrimination masquerading as security. This case deserves to be heard on its merits, not dismissed before the full scope of evidence can be presented. Judge Harrington asked pointed questions of both attorneys, probing the boundaries of crew discretion and the evidence for discriminatory intent. After nearly 3 hours of argument, she called a brief recess to consider her ruling. In the courthouse corridor, Catherine Montgomery approached Nathan. Impressive performance. She said, her tone professional but with an undertone of warning. But this is just the beginning. I'm aware, Nathan replied coolly. Montgomery lowered her voice. SkyRoute is prepared to increase its settlement offer substantially $1 million with a limited confidentiality agreement that would allow you to discuss the incident, just not the settlement terms. Why the sudden generosity? Nathan asked. Because litigation is expensive and unpredictable, Montgomery answered smoothly. And because despite our differing perspectives, no one wants to see your son put through the additional trauma of a trial. Nathan studied her carefully. You've seen the judge's reactions. You know which way she's leaning. Montgomery didn't deny it. Take the offer, Nathan. Some of my clients' investors are getting nervous about potential punitive damages. Before Nathan could respond, the bailiff announced that court was back in session. The opportunity for settlement had passed, at least for the moment. Judge Harrington's ruling was unequivocal. The motion to dismiss is denied. The plaintiff has established sufficient cause to proceed with discovery and trial preparation. This court finds that the serious allegations of civil rights violations warrant full examination. It was the first major victory for the Johnson family, and it opened the floodgates for the discovery process, the formal exchange of evidence between parties that would form the backbone of the trial. As they left the courtroom, Marcus whispered to his father, "What happens now?" "Now," Nathan replied, "we get access to their internal documents, emails, training materials, everything they've been trying to hide. The real fight is just beginning." Behind them, Catherine Montgomery was already on her phone, her expression tense as she reported the ruling to her clients. The stakes had just risen significantly for SkyRoute Airways, and everyone in that courtroom knew it. Later that evening, as the Johnson family celebrated their preliminary victory with a quiet dinner at home, Nathan received a text message from Agent Morales, Judge's husband, received job offer from Meridian subsidiary yesterday. She ruled against them anyway. "Watch your back. They'll escalate now." Nathan showed the message to Diana after Marcus had gone to bed. They tried to influence the judge, he said, disgust evident in his voice. And failed, Diana pointed out. There are still people with integrity in the system. Yes, Nathan agreed. But the warning stands, they're going to escalate. We need to be prepared for whatever comes next. What came next was a discovery battle unlike anything Nathan had experienced in his career. SkyRoute's legal team fought every document request, claimed privilege on thousands of emails, and delayed depositions with procedural objections. But Judge Harrington, perhaps aware of the attempted influence on her husband, showed little patience for these tactics, imposing sanctions for discovery violations and ordering the production of key documents. The legal ground was being prepared for battle, and both sides knew that what happened next would set precedents far beyond one family's fight for justice. This is their training manual for what they call enhanced passenger management, Layla explained, spreading documents across the conference table in Nathan's temporary office. After leaving his firm over their unwillingness to support the case against SkyRoute, Nathan had established a small independent practice focused solely on civil rights litigation. Nathan examined the manual carefully. Look at this language, identifying potential disruptors based on behavioral indicators. But the examples they give are things like questioning crew instructions and exhibiting defensive body language. Subjective criteria that can be applied selectively, Layla noted. And when you combine it with this, she pulled out another document, their internal demographics on security interventions. The pattern becomes clear. 83% of their enhanced management techniques were used on passengers of color, despite those passengers making up less than 30% of their customer base. Nathan added these documents to their growing evidence file. The discovery process, though fought at every turn by SkyRoute's legal team, had yielded damning materials. Internal emails, training documents, and statistical data that painted a disturbing picture of institutional discrimination cloaked as security protocol. What about expert witnesses? Diana asked. She had taken a leave of absence from her nursing position after the hospital's administration made it clear her continued employment was creating complications with certain board members who had ties to SkyRoute. Dr. Elena Vasquez has agreed to testify about the medical impact of taser use on adolescents, Nathan confirmed. And we've secured Dr. James Wilson, the former FAA security consultant, who literally wrote the book on appropriate use of force in aircraft cabins. What about the psychological impact? Diana pressed. Marcus is still having nightmares. His grades have dropped. He flinches at loud noises. Nathan nodded grimly. Dr. Lena Harrison, pediatric trauma specialist, is evaluating him next week. Her testimony on the psychological effects of public humiliation and physical assault on adolescents will be crucial. As they continued building their case, a breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Agent Morales, still officially removed from the SkyRoute investigation, but working behind the scenes, provided a confidential FBI analysis of airline security incidents over the past 5 years. "This is gold," Layla said, reviewing the data. "It shows a clear pattern across the industry, but with SkyRoute as the worst offender by a significant margin. And look at this spike." She pointed to a graph. "It coincides exactly with Blackwell's implementation of his enhanced security measures." The most powerful evidence, however, came from SkyRoute's own records. Despite their attempts to withhold or redact key documents, Judge Harrington's strict discovery orders had forced the production of internal communications that revealed the airline's security culture in stark terms. In one email, Thomas Blackwell had written to his security team, "Certain passenger demographics require heightened vigilance and proactive management. While we must be careful about documentation, for obvious reasons, the frontline team understands which passengers fall into this category." Another email from Blackwell to CEO William Davidson specifically referenced the TASER program. "The CED devices have proven effective as deterrents. While technically outside standard equipment lists, their presence provides our specially trained attendants with confidence when handling non-compliant situations." Davidson's reply was equally damning. "Continue the program, but maintain deniability. Documentation should be verbal briefings only. If the FAA inquires, these are individual actions, not company protocol." "They knew," Nathan said quietly, reading the exchange. "They authorized an unauthorized weapons program and created a culture of racial profiling, all while maintaining plausible deniability. As the case documentation grew, so did public interest. Civil rights organizations offered support. Former SkyRoute employees came forward with additional testimonies, and media coverage increasingly focused on the institutional nature of the problem rather than the isolated incident. The most unexpected ally emerged when Sarah Daniels, SkyRoute's Vice President of Customer Experience, contacted Nathan through an intermediary. Initially hesitant to meet, she finally agreed to a confidential conversation at a neutral location. "I've been fighting Blackwell's methods from the inside for years." Daniels revealed, her voice low, despite the privacy of their meeting place. "I've compiled data showing how his security approach not only discriminates, but actually makes flights less safe by creating unnecessary confrontations." "Would you be willing to testify to that?" Nathan asked. Daniels hesitated. "I have a mortgage, children in college. SkyRoute would destroy me professionally." "We can subpoena you," Nathan offered. "That would provide some protection. You'd be legally required to testify." "Do it," Daniels decided after a moment's thought. "I've stayed silent too long already." As the trial date approached, SkyRoute's legal strategy shifted. Catherine Montgomery approached Nathan with a significantly larger settlement offer, $5 million, with a limited confidentiality agreement that would allow the Johnsons to discuss the incident, but not the specific terms of the settlement. $5 million would set your son up for life, Montgomery argued during their meeting. "My son was already set up for life," Nathan replied evenly. "He had parents who love him, a first-rate education, and unlimited potential. What he didn't have, what no black child in America has, is the guarantee that he can simply exist without being perceived as dangerous. That's what this case is fighting for, and it's not for sale at any price." Montgomery's professional composure slipped momentarily. "You're making a mistake, Johnson. The trial will be brutal for your son, for your family. Our team will have to question his account, challenge his credibility. Is that really what you want him to experience?" "What I want," Nathan said, rising to signal the end of their meeting, "is for my son to see that justice is possible, even against powerful interests. That's worth more than any check you could write." As Montgomery gathered her papers, she paused. "This isn't just about one incident, Nathan. This is about whether we let fear dictate how we treat each other in this country. There are bigger forces at play than just an airline defending itself. I know, Nathan replied. That's precisely why we can't settle. The night before the final pretrial conference, Nathan found Marcus sitting on the back porch, staring at the stars. The past months had changed his son, the carefree boy who had boarded Flight 1824 for his first exciting plane ride, was gone. In his place was a young man who had been forced to confront harsh realities about the world and his place in it. Ready for tomorrow? Nathan asked, sitting beside him. Marcus nodded. I think so, as ready as I'll ever be. It's okay to be nervous, Nathan assured him. Everyone is before trial, even me after all these years. What if I mess up? Marcus asked, voicing his deepest fear. What if I forget something important, or say the wrong thing? Just tell the truth, Nathan advised. That's all you need to do. The truth is on our side, and it's powerful enough on its own. Marcus nodded, though anxiety still shadowed his eyes. Will she be there? Rebecca Winters? Yes, Nathan confirmed, seeing no value in sugarcoating reality. She'll be sitting at their table with the other defendants. Marcus took a deep breath, steadying himself. I've been thinking about what I'll feel when I see her again. At first, I thought I'd be scared. Then I thought I might be angry. But now, I think I just want her to understand what she did, not just to me, but what it meant. Nathan felt a surge of pride at his son's maturity. That's a more generous perspective than many adults would have. It's not about forgiveness, Marcus clarified. I'm not there yet. But I want her to really see me not as a threat or a problem, but as a person who was hurt by what she did. As they prepared to leave for home, Nathan's phone rang. Catherine Montgomery calling one final time. Nathan, she began without preamble. The board has authorized me to increase our offer to $25 million. This is absolutely final. The answer is still no, Catherine. Nathan replied firmly. We'll see you in court tomorrow. After hanging up, he found Diana and Marcus waiting by the door. Another offer, Diana guessed. $25 million, Nathan confirmed. They're getting desperate. Marcus's eyes widened at the amount, but his resolve didn't waver. They're afraid of what people will hear in court. Yes, Nathan agreed. They are. That night, the Johnson family shared a quiet dinner at home. The conversation deliberately avoided the trial, focusing instead on ordinary family matters. Diana's garden plans. Marcus's latest science project, a movie they wanted to see when this was all over. After dinner, as Marcus went upstairs to prepare for bed, Diana turned to Nathan. Whatever happens in that courtroom, we've already won something important. What's that? Nathan asked. Diana glanced toward the stairs where their son had disappeared. Marcus knows that we believe him, that we'll fight for him no matter what, and that his dignity matters more than any amount of money. Some children never learn that lesson. Nathan embraced his wife, drawing strength from her wisdom and courage. Tomorrow would bring challenges they could only partially anticipate, but tonight, in this moment, they were a family united by love and principle. As Nathan checked on Marcus later, he found his son sleeping peacefully for the first time in weeks. Perhaps facing your fears directly, preparing to confront them in the light of day, was sometimes the best cure for the nightmares they spawned in darkness. The morning sun cast long shadows across the courthouse steps as the Johnson family arrived for the first day of trial. News vans lined the street, and reporters called out questions as Nathan, Diana, and Marcus made their way through the crowd flanked by Layla Robinson. Dr. Johnson, do you expect to win against SkyRoute's legal team? Marcus, how do you feel about facing Rebecca Winters today? Mrs. Johnson, why did you reject the settlement offer? Nathan guided his family forward without comment, his hand resting protectively on Marcus's shoulder. They had agreed to let their case speak for itself, rather than trying it in the media. Inside the courtroom, The atmosphere was tense but controlled. The gallery was packed with journalists, civil rights advocates, airline industry representatives, and ordinary citizens drawn by the high-profile nature of the case. Hector Ramirez sat in the front row directly behind the plaintiff's table, offering Marcus an encouraging nod as the family entered. Across the aisle, Catherine Montgomery conferred with her associates at the defense table. Rebecca Winters sat stiffly beside them, her blonde hair pulled back severely, her expression unreadable. Though she maintained her composure, the slight tremor in her hands as she arranged papers before her revealed her inner tension. Thomas Blackwell occupied the chair next to her, his square jaw set in defiance. Victoria Reynolds, SkyRoute's interim CEO, completed the tableau, representing the corporate entity itself. Judge Elaine Harrington called the court to order precisely at 9:00 a.m. Johnson v. SkyRoute Airways, she announced. Civil Action Number 24 CV 7823. Our counsel ready to proceed. Ready for the plaintiff, Your Honor. Nathan confirmed, rising. Ready for the defense, Montgomery echoed. After preliminary matters were addressed, Judge Harrington invited the parties to present their opening statements. Montgomery went first, approaching the jury with confident strides. Ladies and gentlemen, she began, her voice warm and reasonable. This case appears straightforward at first glance. A young man was tased on an airplane after attempting to use the lavatory, while the seatbelt sign was illuminated. The plaintiffs would have you believe this incident occurred solely because of the color of Marcus Johnson's skin. They will show you videos, present statistics, and call expert witnesses to support this narrative. She paused, establishing eye contact with several jurors. But safety at 30,000 feet isn't about statistics or theoretical scenarios. It's about real-time decisions made by trained professionals who are responsible for the lives of everyone on that aircraft. Rebecca Winters made such a decision on May 12th, based not on race, but on behavior that she, with 15 years of experience, perceived as threatening to cabin safety. Montgomery moved closer to the jury box. You'll hear that the plaintiffs rejected a $25 million settlement offer to bring this case to trial. Ask yourselves why. Is it truly about justice? Or is it about using the tragic overreaction of one flight attendant to advance a broader political agenda? She returned to her table. The evidence will show that while mistakes were made that day, mistakes SkyRoute has acknowledged and addressed. These errors resulted from human judgment under pressure, not from racial animus. We ask that you consider the full context and the reality of aviation security before reaching your verdict. As Montgomery concluded, Nathan rose from his seat. Instead of immediately approaching the jury, he turned toward Marcus, making the connection between father and son visible to everyone in the courtroom. Then, with measured steps, he moved to the center of the space before the jury. This case is about a 14-year-old honor student who needed to use the bathroom, he began simply. It's about how the color of his skin transformed that basic human need into a perceived threat. It's about a corporation that trained its employees to see black bodies as inherently dangerous, and about the devastating consequences when that perception is backed by unauthorized weapons and unchecked authority. Nathan didn't use notes or visual aids. His words carried the weight of both professional conviction and personal anguish. The evidence will show that Marcus Johnson did exactly what any other passenger in his situation would do. He asked to use the restroom during a prolonged seatbelt sign period when no actual turbulence was occurring. The evidence will also show that just minutes earlier, a white teenager made the same request and was allowed to proceed without comment or interference. He moved closer to the jury, his voice dropping slightly, compelling them to listen more intently. You will hear from witnesses who saw everything. You will see videos that capture the entire incident. You will review medical records documenting the physical and psychological trauma caused by 50,000 volts of electricity coursing through a child's body. And you will see internal documents revealing that what happened to Marcus wasn't an accident or an overreaction. It was the predictable result of a security philosophy that treated certain passengers as inherently suspicious, based solely on their appearance. Nathan returned briefly to his table, placing his hand on Marcus's shoulder. My son boarded that plane excited for his first flight, eager to see the clouds from above. He left it in handcuffs, soaked in his own urine, traumatized and humiliated. Not because of anything he did wrong, but because a corporation decided that safety meant treating children who look like him as threats first and humans second. Returning to the center of the courtroom, Nathan concluded, "This case isn't just about one incident or one child. It's about whether we as a society will continue to accept discrimination when it's dressed up as security. It's about whether corporations can evade accountability by claiming that prejudice is just protocol. And ultimately, it's about whether Marcus Johnson and every child who looks like him has the right to the same dignity, respect, and presumption of innocence as everyone else." As Nathan returned to his seat, the courtroom remained utterly silent. Even Judge Harrington seemed momentarily affected by the moral clarity of his presentation. "The plaintiff may call its first witness," she directed after a brief pause. "The plaintiff calls Isabella Gonzalez," Nathan announced. Isabella entered the courtroom, her professional demeanor masking the anxiety she clearly felt. After being sworn in, she took the witness stand, glancing briefly at Rebecca Winters before focusing on Nathan. "Ms. Gonzalez, what is your occupation?" Nathan began. "I'm a flight attendant with Continental Airways," she replied. "Previously, I worked for SkyRoute Airways for 7 years. And were you on SkyRoute Flight 1824 on May 12th of this year?" "Yes, I was deadheading traveling as crew to position for my next assignment." "During that flight, did you observe the incident involving Marcus Johnson?" "Yes," Isabella confirmed. "I recorded much of it on my phone." "Why did you begin recording even before the incident occurred?" Nathan asked. Isabella glanced at the defense table before answering. "I noticed a pattern in how Ms. Winters was interacting with different passengers during boarding and the early part of the flight. There was a clear disparity in how she spoke to white passengers versus passengers of color. As someone trained in HR compliance, in my previous role, it raised red flags for me." "Objection?" Montgomery interjected. "Speculative as to the motivations of another person." "Your Honor," Nathan countered. "The witness is testifying to observable behaviors, not speculating about internal motivations." Overruled, Judge Harrington decided. "The witness may continue." Isabella's testimony continued with Nathan guiding her through the events leading up to the tasing incident. Her video footage was played for the jury showing Rebecca's different interactions with passengers based on their race, culminating in the shocking moment when she used the taser on Marcus. During cross-examination, Montgomery attempted to undermine Isabella's credibility. "Ms. Gonzalez, you left SkyRoute Airways under less than favorable circumstances. Isn't that correct?" "I resigned," Isabella replied carefully. After being passed over for promotion 3 times, Montgomery pressed, "Might that experience have colored your perception of your former employer?" "No," Isabella stated firmly. "What I recorded speaks for itself. It's not about my interpretation." The first day continued with testimony from Dr. Elena Vasquez regarding Marcus's physical injuries and from several passengers who had witnessed the incident. Each account reinforced the core narrative that Marcus had been singled out for treatment that no white passenger received for identical behavior. As court adjourned for the day, Nathan found Marcus waiting with Diana near the exit. "You did great," he assured his son, who had watched the proceedings intently throughout the day. "Tomorrow," Marcus asked. Hector testifies first, then Dr. Harrison, about the psychological impact. Nathan explained. "Your testimony is scheduled for Thursday." Marcus nodded, his expression a mixture of apprehension and determination. "I'll be ready." As they left the courthouse, they passed Catherine Montgomery, speaking with reporters. "While we respect the plaintiff's right to pursue this case," she was saying, "SkyRoute Airways remains confident that the evidence will show our crew member acted according to her training and perception of a potential threat situation." Nathan guided his family past the media scrum without comment. The battle lines were clearly drawn, and both sides understood the stakes. This wasn't just about a verdict or damages. It was about competing visions of America itself, about who deserved the presumption of safety and who had to earn it through perfect compliance and perpetual deference. The real fight was just beginning. The courtroom fell silent as Marcus Johnson approached the witness stand on Thursday morning. Dressed in a navy blazer and tie, he appeared both younger and older than his 14 years younger, in his still boyish features, older in the grave composure with which he carried himself. After being sworn in, Marcus took his seat, his eyes briefly meeting his father's, before focusing on the questions to come. Marcus Nathan began gently. "Can you tell the court about your experience on SkyRoute Flight 1824 on May 12th of this year?" Marcus spoke clearly, his voice steady, despite the emotion evident in his eyes. He described his excitement about his first flight, the initial interactions with Rebecca Winters, and the events leading up to his request to use the bathroom. "I saw another kid, a white teenager, use the bathroom just before me," Marcus explained. "The seatbelt sign was on, but there wasn't any turbulence. When I tried to do the same thing, Ms. Winters stopped me immediately." "What happened when she confronted you?" Nathan asked. "I tried to explain that I really needed to go and that I'd seen others using the bathroom," Marcus replied. "She got angry and said I was questioning her authority. I was confused because I was just trying to understand why the rules seemed different for me." As Marcus described the moment of the tasing, his composure wavered slightly. "It felt like fire inside my body. I couldn't control my muscles. I remember falling and then wetting myself in front of everyone." He paused, collecting himself. "The worst part wasn't even the pain. It was feeling helpless, humiliated. Like I wasn't even a person, just a problem to be handled." The jury listened intently, several members visibly moved by Marcus's testimony. Nathan guided him through the aftermath, the handcuffs, the medical treatment, the lingering physical and psychological effects. "How has this experience affected your daily life?" Marcus Nathan asked. "I have trouble sleeping," Marcus admitted. "Nightmares about being attacked, about not being able to move or breathe. I get anxious in confined spaces. I flinch when people raise their voices or make sudden movements near me. School is harder. It's difficult to concentrate when you're always on edge, always watching for danger." Nathan nodded sympathetically. "One last question, Marcus. What do you hope will come from this trial?" Marcus considered the question carefully. "I want people to understand that what happened to me wasn't just about one flight attendant making a bad decision. It was about assumptions, seeing me as threatening, when I was just a kid who needed to use the bathroom. I hope that after this trial, maybe the next black kid on a plane won't have to worry about being treated like a criminal for just existing." "Thank you, Marcus." No further questions. Catherine Montgomery approached for cross-examination, her manner deliberately gentle, a tactical choice that Nathan had anticipated. "Marcus," she began. "First, let me say how sorry I am for what you experienced. No child should ever feel afraid or humiliated, regardless of the circumstances." Marcus nodded cautiously, aware of the strategy behind her sympathetic tone. "I just have a few clarifying questions," Montgomery continued. "When the seatbelt sign was illuminated, you understood that passengers were supposed to remain seated, correct?" "Yes," Marcus acknowledged. "But people were still moving around the cabin, including using the bathroom. And when Ms. Winters instructed you to return to your seat, you didn't immediately comply, did you? I tried to explain that I really needed to go and that others had been allowed to. Marcus corrected. Montgomery nodded. So you questioned her instruction, rather than complying first and discussing it later. I wasn't trying to be difficult, Marcus replied. I was confused about why the rules seemed different for me than for the white passenger before me. Montgomery continued this line of questioning, attempting to frame Marcus's confusion as defiance, his legitimate questions as confrontational behavior. Throughout, Marcus maintained his composure, refusing to be provoked into the defensive or angry responses that Montgomery clearly hoped to elicit. No further questions, Montgomery finally concluded, unable to shake Marcus's credible testimony. As Marcus returned to his seat beside his parents, Diana squeezed his hand in silent support and pride. He had faced his accuser with dignity and truth, standing firm where many adults might have faltered. The trial's most dramatic testimony came the following day when Rebecca Winters took the stand. Under Montgomery's careful questioning, she portrayed herself as a dedicated professional who had perceived a threat in Marcus's confrontational stance and refusal to comply with safety instructions. I feared for the safety of everyone on that aircraft, she claimed, her voice trembling slightly. In my 15 years as a flight attendant, I've never faced such an aggressive response to a simple instruction. During a brief recess before cross-examination, Nathan noticed Rebecca sitting alone in a corridor staring at her hands. Against his better judgment, he approached her. "Ms. Winters," he said quietly. She looked up, startled. "Dr. Johnson, I don't think we should be talking. I just wanted to ask you something," Nathan said. "Not as opposing parties in this case, but as one human being to another. Do you truly believe my son was a threat to that aircraft?" Rebecca's carefully maintained facade cracked just for a moment. "After 9/11, we were told to be vigilant, to never hesitate. My brother-in-law died in the Pentagon that day. I promised myself I would never let something like that happen again." "I understand grief and fear," Nathan said, "but my son was just a child who needed to use the bathroom." "I know that now," she whispered so softly he almost missed it. Then, composing herself, she stood. Our attorneys would not approve of this conversation. As she walked away, Nathan realized something important. Rebecca Winters wasn't a monster. She was a person whose fear and training had combined to create something monstrous. When cross-examination began, Nathan's approach was measured, but relentless. He established that Winters had no formal training in threat assessment, that SkyRoute's own policies prohibited the use of tasers, and that she had allowed a white teenager to use the bathroom under identical circumstances just minutes earlier. "Ms. Winters," Nathan asked, his tone conversational, "in your 15 years as a flight attendant, how many passengers have you tased?" Winters shifted uncomfortably. "Just the one incident." "Just my son," Nathan clarified. "And in those 15 years, how many white passengers have you tased for asking to use the bathroom during a seatbelt sign?" "Objection!" Argumentative, Montgomery called out. "Sustained," Judge Harrington ruled. "Rephrase, Dr. Johnson." Nathan nodded respectfully. "Ms. Winters, have you ever used a taser or any similar device on a white passenger?" "No," Winters admitted. "And yet, you testified earlier that you've encountered many instances of passenger non-compliance throughout your career." "Correct." "Yes. Thank you, Ms. Winters." No further questions. The trial's unexpected turning point came with the testimony of Jason Miller, the surprise witness SkyRoute had prepared to contradict Marcus's account. Miller testified that from his seat, he had observed Marcus being aggressive and defiant toward Rebecca Winters. The boy was practically squaring up to her, Miller claimed. His body language was threatening. "I remember thinking, This is going to escalate if someone doesn't step in. The testimony directly contradicted the video evidence, but Montgomery presented Miller as having a unique angle that the recordings didn't capture. During cross-examination, Nathan approached Miller with a deceptively casual manner. "Mr. Miller, you testified that you were seated in 26C, correct?" "That's right," Miller confirmed. "And from that position, you had a clear view of the interaction between my son and Ms. Winters?" "Yes, I did." Nathan nodded thoughtfully. "That's interesting, because according to the seating chart from Flight 1824, which I'm entering, as Plaintiff's Exhibit 73 seat, 26C, would have given you a view of the back of Ms. Winters, not her face or my son's expressions." Miller hesitated. "Well, I may have the seat number wrong. It was several months ago." "I understand," Nathan said sympathetically. "Memory can be tricky. Let me help refresh yours." He displayed the passenger manifest on the courtroom screen. "According to SkyRoute's records, you were actually seated in 32F, a window seat, 6 rows back, with no direct line of sight to where the incident occurred." Miller's expression tightened. "I must have moved during the flight." "Did you?" Nathan asked. "Because flight attendant reports show the flight was completely full, with no empty seats for passengers to change positions." As Miller struggled to reconcile these contradictions, Nathan delivered the coup de grace. "Mr. Miller, are you aware that false testimony under oath constitutes perjury, a federal offense punishable by up to 5 years in prison?" "Objection," Montgomery shouted. "Counsel is intimidating the witness. I'm simply ensuring the witness understands the gravity of sworn testimony," Nathan countered. Judge Harrington leaned forward. "I'll allow it, but tread carefully, Dr. Johnson." Nathan turned back to Miller. "Let me ask you directly. Did anyone from SkyRoute Airways or their representatives coach you on what to say in this courtroom today?" Miller glanced at the defense table, visibly sweating now. I'd like to consult with an attorney before answering any more questions." The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Judge Harrington called for order, then dismissed the jury for an early lunch recess. "Mr. Miller, you are instructed to remain available to this court. We will address the matter of potential perjury after the recess." When proceedings resumed, Miller was nowhere to be found. He had left the courthouse during the recess, ignoring the judge's instructions. Judge Harrington, clearly disturbed by these developments, instructed the jury to disregard Miller's testimony entirely and announced that she would be referring the matter to the U.S. Attorney's Office for investigation of potential witness tampering and perjury. The next morning, Montgomery appeared subdued as she informed the court that SkyRoute would not be calling their remaining character witnesses, effectively conceding that their case had been severely damaged by Miller's collapse on the stand. The trial's final days saw expert testimony from both sides, with SkyRoute's security experts attempting to justify their enhanced passenger management protocols as necessary in a post-9/11 world, while the plaintiff's experts systematically dismantled these claims, with data showing how such approaches actually decreased cabin safety by creating unnecessary confrontations. As closing arguments approached, Nathan found himself unexpectedly anxious. Not about the legal arguments, those were clear and compelling, but about the personal stakes. This case had consumed nearly a year of their lives, had strained their family bonds, had forced Marcus to grow up faster than any child should. Had it been worth it? That night, as Nathan reviewed his closing argument in the hotel room, Marcus knocked on his door. "Can't sleep?" Nathan asked, making room for his son on the couch. "I was thinking about tomorrow," Marcus said. "About the end of all this." "Nervous?" Marcus shook his head. "Not anymore. Whatever happens with the verdict, we already won something important." "What's that?" Nathan asked, genuinely curious. "We showed them. They can't just do whatever they want and get away with it," Marcus replied. "And I learned something too, that standing up for what's right is hard, but it matters, even when it hurts. Nathan felt a lump in his throat. You've taught me something too, you know. What's that? That courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about doing what's right, even when you are afraid. Nathan placed his hand on his son's shoulder. I'm proud of you, Marcus. More than you'll ever know. As Marcus headed back to his room, Nathan returned to his closing argument with renewed conviction. Whatever the jury decided, his son had already claimed the most important victory, reclaiming his dignity and voice in a world that had tried to silence him. The courtroom buzzed with tension as the jury filed in after 3 days of deliberation. Marcus sat between his parents, his posture straight, but his hands clasped tightly in his lap. Behind them, the gallery was packed journalists, civil rights advocates, airline industry representatives, and ordinary citizens, drawn by a case that had captured national attention. Judge Harrington addressed the jurors. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, have you reached a verdict? The forewoman, a middle-aged black woman who had maintained an inscrutable expression throughout the trial, stood. We have, Your Honor. In the case of Johnson v. SkyRoute Airways, the forewoman began on the count of violation of civil rights. Under color of authority, we find for the plaintiff. Diana's hand tightened around Marcus's. On the count of assault and battery, we find for the plaintiff. On the count of negligent hiring and supervision, we find for the plaintiff. On every count, the jury found in favor of the Johnsons. When it came to damages, they awarded Marcus $20 million in compensatory damages and an unprecedented $50 million in punitive damages against SkyRoute Airways. The courtroom erupted in reaction gasps, cheers, and the furious scribbling of journalists capturing the historic moment. Judge Harrington called for order before addressing the defendants directly. In light of the evidence presented in this trial, I am referring this matter to the Department of Justice for criminal investigation. The deliberate violation of federal aviation safety regulations, obstruction of justice, and potential conspiracy against civil rights warrants further examination beyond the scope of this civil proceeding. As the court adjourned, Nathan embraced his family, their long fight for justice finally vindicated. But he knew that the true measure of their victory would not be found in monetary damages or even criminal charges. It would be in the changes their case would force throughout an industry that had too long hidden discrimination behind the shield of security. Across the courtroom, Catherine Montgomery approached her professional demeanor intact, despite the devastating defeat. Congratulations, Dr. Johnson. You tried an exceptional case. Thank you, Nathan replied simply. Montgomery glanced at Marcus. You should be proud of your son. His testimony was compelling. Before Nathan could respond, Marcus spoke for himself. It wasn't about being compelling. It was about telling the truth. Montgomery nodded, accepting the rebuke implicit in his words. Of course. I wish you well, Marcus. As the defense team departed, Rebecca Winters lingered behind. She approached the Johnson family hesitantly, her eyes red-rimmed from crying. I know it doesn't change anything, she said quietly, but I am truly sorry. I never saw you as a person that day, just a potential problem. That was wrong, and I will live with that knowledge for the rest of my life. Marcus studied her face for a long moment. I hope you learn from this, he finally said. Not just you, but everyone. That's the whole point. Rebecca nodded, her composure cracking. I will, I promise. As she walked away, Diana put her arm around Marcus's shoulders. That was gracious of you. Dad always says that justice isn't about revenge, Marcus replied. It's about making things right. On the courthouse steps before a forest of microphones and cameras, Nathan stood with Diana and Marcus. Today's verdict sends a powerful message that corporations cannot hide discrimination behind the language of security, that black children deserve the same presumption of innocence as any other child, and that accountability matters. A reporter called out, "What about the size of the award?" $70 million is one of the largest civil rights verdicts in history. The amount reflects not just the harm done to our son, Diana responded, but the deliberate nature of SkyRoute's discriminatory practices and their attempts to cover them up. This wasn't one employee making a mistake. It was an institutional failure at every level. Marcus, another reporter asked, "What would you say to other kids who've experienced similar treatment?" Marcus stepped forward, his voice steady as he answered, "I'd tell them that what happened to them wasn't their fault, that they deserve better, and that sometimes fighting for what's right is hard, but worth it." As the family prepared to leave, Nathan added one final comment. This case was never just about money. It was about truth and accountability. A significant portion of this award will go toward establishing a foundation to protect the rights of all travelers and to ensure that what happened to Marcus doesn't happen to anyone else's child. Later that evening, as the Johnson family shared a quiet dinner at home, their first meal, without the shadow of the trial hanging over them, Diana raised her glass in a toast. To Marcus, she said simply, "The bravest person I know." Marcus smiled a genuine smile that reached his eyes for the first time in months. "To all of us," he countered, "we did this together." Nathan watched his son seeing glimmers of the carefree boy who had existed before Flight 1824. But Nathan watched his son seeing glimmers of the carefree boy who had existed before Flight 1824, but also recognizing the young man who had emerged from that trauma, more aware of the world's injustices, but also more determined to face them with courage and integrity. Some wounds would never fully heal. Some memories would never completely fade. But in that moment, surrounded by family and vindicated by justice, Marcus Johnson was no longer just a victim. He was a victor, a voice, a catalyst for change. And that more than any monetary award was the true verdict that mattered. 1 week after the verdict, SkyRoute Airways announced a complete restructuring of its security protocols. The interim CEO, Victoria Reynolds, who had replaced William Davidson, held a press conference outlining specific changes, effective immediately. SkyRoute is implementing a comprehensive passenger rights policy developed in consultation with civil rights experts. All security procedures will be standardized, transparent, and applied equally, regardless of a passenger's appearance or background. We are establishing an independent oversight committee to monitor compliance and investigate complaints. The impact extended far beyond a single airline. The Federal Aviation Administration, under congressional pressure, stemming from the case, instituted industry-wide regulations regarding passenger treatment and prohibited discriminatory security measures. For the first time, airlines were required to collect and publicly report data on passenger complaints, categorized by race, enabling patterns of discrimination to be identified and addressed. Not everyone welcomed these changes. A vocal minority of commentators and industry figures argued that the new regulations would compromise security and create unnecessary bureaucracy. Several airlines lobbied against the reporting requirements, claiming they would be burdensome and costly to implement. "This is the backlash we expected," Nathan explained to Marcus when they saw a particularly vitriolic segment on a cable news channel. "Change never comes without resistance. Does that mean it won't stick?" Marcus asked. "No," Nathan assured him. "It means we have to stay vigilant to make sure it does." Criminal investigations followed, as Judge Harrington had recommended. Rebecca Winters faced charges of assault and civil rights violations. Thomas Blackwell was indicted for conspiracy against civil rights and obstruction of justice for his role in creating and concealing the unauthorized security program. Most significantly, former CEO William Davidson was charged with knowingly authorizing prohibited weapons on commercial aircraft and creating a corporate environment that encouraged racial profiling. For Hector Ramirez, the retired principal, whose moral courage had been a turning point in the case, justice came in the form of full reinstatement to his teaching position with back pay and a formal apology from the school board. The students organized a celebration for his return, many wearing t-shirts bearing the hashtag #TruthForMarcus that had become synonymous with standing against injustice. "You taught us something more important than any textbook ever could," one student told Hector during the celebration. "You showed us what integrity looks like when it's tested." Isabella Gonzalez, whose whistleblowing had provided crucial evidence, initially feared she would never work in the airline industry again. Instead, she was hired by the newly formed Aviation Passenger Rights Commission, a federal oversight body created in response to the SkyRoute case. Her intimate knowledge of discriminatory practices made her an invaluable asset in reforming the industry. The Johnson family's victory extended far beyond financial compensation. Using a portion of the settlement, Marcus established the Flight 1824 Foundation, dedicated to supporting victims of discrimination in transportation and providing legal resources to those who couldn't afford representation. "I want to turn what happened to me into something positive," Marcus explained at the foundation's launch event. "No one should face discrimination when simply trying to travel, and no one should lack the means to seek justice when their rights are violated." Nathan found his legal practice transformed by the case. While he had always focused on civil rights, the national attention brought by Marcus's case connected him with resources and allies that expanded his ability to take on institutional discrimination. He established a special division within his new firm, dedicated to transportation discrimination cases, providing pro bono representation to victims who lacked financial resources. Diana returned to nursing with a new focus on trauma recovery, specializing in helping young people deal with experiences of discrimination and institutional violence. Her insights from both professional training and personal experience made her an invaluable resource for families navigating similar traumas. For Marcus, healing was a gradual process. The nightmares about the tasing became less frequent, though certain triggers like the sound of electrical equipment or crowded confined spaces could still provoke anxiety. Working with the foundation gave him purpose and a sense of agency that helped counterbalance the helplessness he had felt on that flight. 3 months after the verdict, Marcus Johnson stood at the podium in a crowded auditorium, addressing the inaugural conference of the National Coalition for Equitable Transportation. Before him sat airline executives, civil rights leaders, government regulators, and families who had experienced discrimination similar to his own. When I boarded Flight 1824 last May, he began, his voice steady and clear. I was just a kid excited about seeing clouds from above. I never imagined that asking to use the bathroom would change my life and eventually an entire industry. The audience listened intently as Marcus shared not just what had happened to him, but how it had transformed him. The hardest part wasn't the tasing itself, though, that was painful. It wasn't even the humiliation, though, that was devastating. The hardest part was realizing that some people would never see me as just a 14-year-old boy, that my skin color would always make me a potential threat in their eyes. Marcus paused, looking out at the diverse faces before him. But the most powerful lesson I learned came later during the fight for justice. I discovered that for every person who sees me as a threat, there are many more who see me as a human being deserving of dignity and respect. People like Mr. Ramirez, who stood up for me on that plane when most passengers stayed silent. People like Ms. Gonzalez, who risked her career to tell the truth. And countless others who refused to accept that treating someone differently because of their race was just protocol or procedure. He gestured toward his parents seated in the front row. My father taught me that justice isn't given freely, it's claimed by those brave enough to demand it. My mother showed me that healing isn't just about recovering from trauma, but about transforming it into something meaningful. Together they helped me understand that what happened on that flight wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of a new chapter. As Marcus concluded his address, the audience rose in a standing ovation. Not because he was a victim with a compelling story, but because he had become a leader in his own right, a young man whose dignity and determination had catalyzed meaningful change. Later that evening, as the Johnson family walked along the National Mall, Marcus stopped to look up at the Lincoln Memorial, illuminated against the night sky. "You know what I think about sometimes?" he said, his breath visible in the cool autumn air. "All the kids like me who never got justice, who were treated badly because of how they look, but didn't have parents who could fight for them, or a video that went viral." Nathan nodded, understanding his son's perspective. "That's why the work we're doing through the foundation matters so much. It's for all those voices that never got heard. And that's why I want to be a lawyer someday," Marcus said, the decision evident in his voice. "Not just because of you, Dad, but because I've seen how the law can change things when it's used the right way." Diana smiled, hearing the certainty in her son's words. The past months had been difficult. The trial, the media attention, the adjustments to their new reality. But through it all, Marcus had not just survived. He had grown into someone stronger and more purposeful than before. As they continued their walk, Marcus looked up at the stars visible between the city lights. "Remember when I asked if clouds look different from above?" he said with a small smile. "They do. But so does everything else once you've seen it from a new perspective." Nathan watched his son, recognizing the wisdom in his words. Marcus would always carry the scars of what had happened on Flight 1824, the memory of helplessness, the knowledge of injustice, but he had refused to be defined by that moment. Instead, he had transformed it into a catalyst for change, not just for himself, but for countless others who would never face the same treatment because of his courage. Justice hadn't erased the past, but it had created space for a different future, one where a black child could board an airplane without being seen as a threat, where accountability was possible, even against powerful interests, where dignity wasn't something to be earned, but a right to be respected. And that perhaps was the most important victory of all. Not the verdict or the settlement, but the reclaiming of possibility, the restoration of faith that America could still be a place where justice, however delayed or difficult, remained within reach of those brave enough to demand it. If this story moved you, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us share more powerful stories of everyday people standing up against injustice. Leave a comment, letting us know what you thought, or if you've experienced similar discrimination while traveling. And if you know someone who needs to hear this message of courage and perseverance, please share this video with them. Together we can ensure that stories like Marcus's are heard, and that change continues to happen one brave action at a time.